Okay.
This is great. Make another one and I'll go on.
Yeah, the meeting place for this one has to be changed because we're going up the Malala. Yes, it would be.
Signed you in as a non-voting member
they're
because the
out.
city
I'll just
recorder hasn't
bang.
put your name in the machine yet. Sorry
Yeah,
about that.
yeah.
Did you see this?
All right.
No, I haven't. What is it?
It's the new instructor at the college.
Okay.
I've
That's
never
good.
heard her name.
Okay, let's go ahead and take roll and get the meeting going.
I'll do that from here.
Okay.
There we go.
Get a little light on.
Go sit down there.
Yes, you can.
To see what's behind you, you flip that steel toggle switch over.
Yeah, there we go. And then
Yeah.
flip the metal switch over there. Yeah, the other way, I
Do what
think.
now?
This thing, yeah. Oh, did you sign in? No. Sign in.
Oh, okay.
That's the system.
Mine just goes
Do it the other
oh,
way.
there,
There.
okay. All right.
The speed of light's slower than it used to be.
Einstein said that, didn't he?
You want to call it to order, Brian, when you're ready?
All right.
When you're ready, Brian?
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to call the meeting to order. And have you completed roll, or are we going to do that verbally here?
Well, all of our members are present, with the exception of Richard Craven, who isn't here tonight. We have a new member. We'd like to welcome Ginger Redlinger. Thank you.
Good to see you. Good to see you.
We'll get you up to speed on the technology with the city recorder at some point here. Thank you for being here tonight, everybody that could, because we have some important items on the agenda. And with that, I'll let Brian lead us into the agenda items.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, we're going to start with a presentation by Kelly Moosbrugger. I think that's how you say it, on the Willamette Falls Legacy Project. So go ahead and start up. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for having me tonight. My name is Kelly Moosbrugger. I am a planner, fellow planner with Pete for Oregon City. And I've been working mostly on the Willamette Falls Legacy Project for the last 9 months or so. So I'm here to just give you an update. I believe it was back in the summer of last year, to kind of introduce the project. We've come a long way since then, so I'm here to give you an update and tell you what's coming next with that. So I have a short, hopefully somewhat short presentation, and then if you have any questions, feel free to ask when I'm finished. So this project began in about June of last year. We started with a visioning process to ask the community what they'd like to see on this 23-acre former industrial site, and where they'd like to see it. Looking far into the future to the year 2035. After that, we came up with a site design concept and shopped that out again to the community to get feedback on that. And we're at the point now where we have a proposed master plan and zone change for the site. So I'll show you what that looks like today. There we go. So the site is 22 to 23 acres. Ooh, are we on a timer here? 22 to 23 acres, over 500,000 square feet. We'll see if it keeps going. 500,000 square feet of space and over 50 structures. All of the equipment on site has been removed at this point, and it's just empty buildings. We've had an extensive public involvement process. This shows one of our meetings that we held at the Tumwater Room in October. We had over 130 in attendance at that meeting, and when we recently had our Champions event in downtown Portland to try to reach out region-wide. We had over 300 folks show up to show their support, and we've had hundreds of people sign up as community champions to help support the project in the future. So we've got a great response from the community. Okay, there we go. So the site, we're only looking at the Oregon City side of the river. The Westland side still has the operating Westland Paper Company and the PGE Sullivan plant. So we've got about a quarter mile of shoreline from the property's edge along 99 out to the PGE dam, and then another quarter to third mile of waterfront up above the falls all the way to Kenema. The project has been guided by 4 core values from the beginning. These values are adopted by the Oregon City Commission: historic and cultural interpretation, public access to the falls, healthy habitat, and economic redevelopment. Those are not in any order. We don't put any ahead of the others. We think that they're all absolutely essential to have a successful project. So for historic and cultural interpretation, obviously we know this is a significant site. It's historical for not only Native tribes, but for pioneers, end of the Oregon Trail, the beginning of industrialization of the western half of the United States, the first transmission of electricity over a distance. So there's a lot of history here and a lot of interpretation opportunities. This photo pre-1900 shows the kind of original shoreline there that's now been built over. On the site, we've got the Oregon City Woolen Mill, the largest structure there, and then on the other side, the Oregon City Flour Mill. The foundation is still underneath the current development that's there today. There are over 50 structures on site. There are 4 plus 1 foundation that we've picked out as worthy of redevelopment and keeping those on the site. So the master plan specifically points out those 4 buildings and says the redevelopment plan for this site has to incorporate these buildings in some way. Not necessarily reusing the entire building, but at least a one wall of a building, somehow preserving something of that building on the site to keep that character and that sense of place. So those 4 buildings are the D-Ink building here from 1927, number 4 paper machine, very large volume structure, lots that you can do there. The Woolen Mill Foundation, and then you'll also have the Hawley building and Mill O. And those are shown in orange here, and the buildings and the structures that are shown in purple are other significant items and buildings on the site that could be kept as an interpretive element, but those are not specifically required to stay within the master plan. The Native tribes continue to harvest lamprey on the site each year, and we are working as closely as we can with the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde, Warm Springs, and all the other tribes that have a history here. I think we're moving on to public access here. This was once Main Street, downtown Oregon City, before it became the mill complex. It was part of downtown, and part of the framework plan is basically bringing that back and integrating it back into downtown. So this is the original plat. You see that the street grid was on the site, and so we plan to reintroduce that street grid through the plan. And then we've also looked at transportation improvements that need to be made to get people out there. And so these are the vehicular improvements. You can see there's a new light at 6th and 99, a new entrance at the future Water Street, and a few changes to the just the signal timing and the lanes at Main and 99. Some of these are not going to be required right away, but will kind of come up as development occurs on the site and more traffic is generated from that site. We're also looking at pedestrian and bicycle access. We want to have multiple ways to access the site on foot and by bicycle. So this is what Water Street looks like right now, and then here's a rendering of what that could look like in the future. dedicated as a public street. And then you also see here a public walkway along the waterfront, the very beginning of that. And so that would stretch from 99 there, where you see the 99 and Water Street meeting, all the way out to the falls. And that would be kind of the main public access out to the falls there. What you see in yellow are platforms, viewing platforms along the way, existing infrastructure that could be kept there to be used as viewing platforms. And then you see the street grid reintroduced, and then that dotted line at the top going over 99 and Railroad would be a new pedestrian access from the promenade to the site. So here's the existing waterfront. You can see it's industrialized and lots of invasive species. Here's a rendering of what that waterfront trail could look like when it's built. And then that trail would go all the way out to that last platform that we refer to as the dance floor to see the falls. And so that that path looks like this now. It's part of the PGE dam. We're working with PGE on an easement to get people out there. And that's what that could look like after it's improved. We've got the lagoon area. This is, they used to, the Blue Heron Mill would take water from this lagoon and use it in their paper making process. But since they've stopped, those pipes have been cut off and that water has been stagnant. So there are invasives that have started growing in there. We had someone from Portland Bureau of Environmental Services come out and take some samples of the plants because it's sorry that I can't tell you the species. I don't remember what it was, but it's been found elsewhere along the Willamette. And so he wanted to take and study that. But a lot of it is invasives. And one of the opportunities through this master plan is to get this water flowing again back through the site into the original tail races. And so they would flow through the site and then back into the lower river, and that would get that water flowing and improve that water quality. And so another thing you can do with this lagoon area is get some public access there too. So have kind of a little boat ramp for kayaks, canoes, stand-up paddleboards. Those buildings in the master plan they're not those 5 buildings that have to stay, so they could be reused depending on a future property owner, or they could go away and that could become some open space at the end of the future main street. Another trail that would eventually connect pedestrians to the site is the spur line that goes all the way to Kanema. Really nice calm water, currently kind of in a state with a lot of invasive plants so there's opportunity there to clean that up and make that into kind of a rails to trails connection to Kanema. And of course we know the site floods. There are floodplain issues. A good portion of the site is in the floodplain. What you see there in blue is floodplain, and so that portion of the site has been designated as basically open space, leaving the remainder of the site as private development. And this is underneath, if you look where the yellow circle is, and then below that you have 2 yellow rectangles. This is kind of the view below that. So, we call it the catacombs. And it's going to be very expensive to rip out, although there would be opportunities if you remove all of that to restore habitat. And so, we're looking at options of, taking all of that away or keeping some of it there and using it as kind of industrial ruins as part of a interpretive park. And an example is Mill Ruins Park in Minneapolis, an old flour mill that has been turned into a park and a museum, and there are kind of crumbling walls and crumbling infrastructure that's remaining on site. It's pretty interesting, and it offers continued opportunities for habitat restoration. And so our healthy habitat core value, there are numerous opportunities here. One thing is adding roughness to the shoreline. With all the developments, kind of flattened that out. There are no places for migratory fish to rest. So if some of that, some of those buildings and all that fill is taken away, that can be restored. Along with the water flow from the lagoon, habitat around the clarifier area, and then riverbank vegetation up along the upper river where the Kanema Trail would go. And then also green roof habitat is an option on the site itself. There isn't soil really on the site to be heard of. It's all concrete and all basalt. So having any sort of trees or landscaping on site is going to be limited, very limited to what you can do with the green roof, and maybe having large planters for street trees and things like that. But you know, a lot of landscaping is going to be very difficult on the site due to the lack of soil. Economic redevelopment wise, we've got out of 22 acres, 6 acres are development blocks, and then in green and yellow you have 3 waterfront block areas, and those would mostly be open space, but they're you know, especially in block 9 up where those buildings were earlier where we showed the kayakers in the lagoon, there is opportunity to keep some buildings there as well. So there may be a bit more than 6 acres of private development, depending on a property owner. And this just shows how views from the bluff would be preserved. With the master plan, we will have a height limit on development that would limit the height so that if you're up on the promenade, you still have great views across the river. And then even across Main Street, as you get closer to the river, those heights would step down. And so here's the basic framework plan. Just shows the basic layout of the streets, the waterfront trail, the development blocks, open space, and then those waterfront areas in kind of the green and yellow hashed marks that are could be part of development and could also be part of open space. So this is kind of the framework that any future developer would have to build into. We have a very long list of allowed uses on this site. It would be similar to the mixed-use downtown zone, but even a little more flexible, allowing light industrial uses so that we can have jobs back on the site, decent wage jobs. And of course, all sorts of office, multifamily, commercial, retail, tourism-based like hotels, all will be permitted on that site. And so our consultants drew up some nice demonstration plans to show what that might look like. I'll go quickly through those. This one is a little bit more open space oriented. You have a lot of green spaces here, and the tail races have been opened up. And then that's where the waterfront trail would go in this situation. A little close-up of the tail race being restored. Then Plan B, this is more development oriented. You've got more buildings on the site and a little less green space. And then Plan C is kind of a hybrid. These aren't, you know, alternatives that we're choosing among. These are just demonstrations of what that could look like. There are probably hundreds of different ways this could go, but you know, this is just a few examples. Okay, so as far as implementation goes, we have 3 key words: patience, contingent relationships, so public-public partnerships and public-private partnerships, and then transformative action to really transform this site. In this current, you know, real estate market, development is not really occurring in downtown Oregon City, and so in order to spur that development, you know, that site needs to be transformed through public access to the falls, essentially. So what we're looking at is a continuum of public to private investment, starting with public access. We strongly believe that public access to the falls is worthy of investment in itself, regardless of what it does for the private sector, and regardless of what it does for downtown. Although we know that it will be positive, we think that in itself, it's public entities, you know, should be funding public access to the falls. And so what we're doing at the moment is looking for grants and funding opportunities to start planning that waterfront trail. That's kind of like #1 project for this site. That's going to be the first thing to happen, we think. And so even though the plan isn't fully adopted yet, we are beginning to look for those grant opportunities and apply for grants so that we can get that funding in line and get the project started. Open space and amenities, that we think also was worthy of public investment, but needs to be coordinated with private development, because whatever's proposed on the private side is probably going to mesh a lot with the open space. And so we need to work together with private developers on designing that open space. Public infrastructure would be contingent on private investment in the site. And then you have private development, which is going to be, mostly private money. So we've got the public access, invest now. We could just go through here. So fund and build it now, public access. Fund it now, but coordinate with a private developer for open space. Fund it now with a contingency that private investment is coming. And then, of course, private development. If there was any public assistance with private development, it would obviously be contingent as well. And so, in summary, those public-public partnerships are important. Oregon City we can't do it on our own. We've estimated that waterfront trail could cost total ballpark, but $30 million is what we're thinking. It could get to. So obviously, Oregon City can't do it on our own. We our partnerships with Metro, with the county, and with the state are really, really vital. And then, of course, public-private partnerships in the future. There's not a public or a private owner currently. There's an offer on the site, but we are fully engaged with the bankruptcy trustee for the site, and will continue to be fully engaged with any private owner. One thing that our community development director mentioned at a presentation last week about the public-public partnerships is a story about the Port of Bellingham. Was working with the city of Bellingham on a project, a redevelopment project. They were working together with a plan. Then elections occurred, and the leadership changed, and the two entities started just going down totally different paths, and they stopped working together. And long story short, 14 years later, nothing has happened on that property in Bellingham. So, the moral of the story, elections can really affect this project, and we need strong partnerships to kind of be able to weather any of those changes. And we need a lot of public support, which we think we have, but public support is very, very important so that politics and elections don't derail this project. And so, as far as the future timeline, we've submitted the land use application. That'll be available for, we'll post it on our website and have it available very soon, by the end of the week or next week. And then the first hearing before the Planning Commission is April 21st. So we'll have a few Planning Commission hearings and then a few City Commission hearings, and we should have approval by July or August of this year from the City Commission. And then in the meantime, we'll be continuing to work on fundraising, lobbying, building those partnerships. Then will come, of course, when the open space and the trail is developed, there'll be more public processes to engage the community in designing that open space and that trail. And then future private development would also have to go through more land use processes to get any plans approved. So there's your timeline, and that's all I have. Any questions?
I have a question. Yeah. Nice presentation, by the way.
Thanks.
Nice, concise overview. Your waterfront trail, I see the upbound section going upriver. The downbound section goes past Riverview Plaza Park, which is a park we built some time ago with youth. Is it proposed to be below grade or going along 99E where it's so noisy, heading downriver? And where does it go?
Heading down all the way towards...
It shows it going down in your graphic below the arch bridge.
Right.
How does it get
So
past?
it would just connect up with the sidewalk on 99, so with Willamette Terrace, and then all the way down. We don't have... There isn't a proposal to have it go below 99. And we do realize that between 10th and the site, that sidewalk on 99 is only 5 feet wide, and it's not really it's not very comfortable, at least for a pedestrian. So there is a plan, and there has been a plan for a long time. It's in the regional transportation plan. It's just not funded at this time, but there's a plan to replace that viaduct and have a much larger, nicer sidewalk that would connect where you're talking about to the site.
I'd really ask you to look seriously at the below grade thing.
Okay.
It is so quiet. I put a
Oh, yeah.
trail in there for access to the maintenance of Riverview, Willamette View Terrace, I'm sorry, you're right. And the landscape there. And you go over the side, drop 5 feet, you don't hear any traffic. You don't see any people
Yeah.
unless they look over on you. And then the sewer line begins there and continues clear down to Sportcraft Marina, where it disappears again. And when this committee was in its previous form, we actually were advocating that be considered, and it seemed to be some concern about policing. Well, we've got Portland, who has 3 miles on the east side and 4 miles on the west side of trail that, is below grade.
Right.
And I think it's just totally different atmosphere. So I ask you to consider that. The other thing I was going to ask you, rezoning, is that underway right now?
Yes, it's hand in hand with the land use application, with the master plan. And so that's, it's zone industrial now. The new mixed use zone would be fairly similar to the downtown zone.
Okay. All right, and then I'll stop here on this question. The upper lagoon you talk about, that showed the kayaks and such, when we were on a tour with you, I commented on floating wetlands, and I've seen them done before with floating structures. And if you don't want to build them, guess what? Log rafts become that later on with vegetation, and that whole area that's somewhat deep and somewhat shallow could be a wonderful wildlife area if they would consider your Portland Park Bureau folks and others that you're working with looking at floating wetland elements, because it can be done very easily. Works really well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on a few things there. The rail line heading south there has some of the most worst infestations of trees, non-native invasive trees that I've seen anywhere in the Portland area. It's not like it's a huge, unending job there, but it does need attention needs to be paid there because it is a different assemblage than partially because it's so dry and rocky. And there are native plant assemblages that will grow on the rocks out there. You can see it at the Kalaka area, buckwheat and Oregon sunshine and things along that line. And they seem to put up with getting flooded and all that, even though they're basically rock plants. So. The other issue that I don't feel is being looked at hard enough yet is the possibility, with the right decisions in the near future, to have rail service to that site, which could go a long ways towards addressing the access issues that site has. There's been statements like they could attract 1 million people a year. You're not going to get 1 million people in there the way it is now. And rail traffic could make a difference. And I think that should seriously be looked at. And, that might even involve the old rail line, or maybe not, depending on how you decide to do it. And it does rest on a decision that has not been made at the state level. But
Right.
our input needs to be made if it's going to go the right way. So,
Yeah.
and if they make the wrong decision, we won't even have a railroad station in this town. So,
Right. The master plan does mention that, that's a future possibility.
Yeah.
It would absolutely allow that to happen. There's nothing in the master plan that would preclude any sort of transit or high-speed rail coming to the site.
yeah, and but I guess my point is that it coming to the site may require political pressure on people that want to see that happen. Just waiting to see if it does may not give you the right result, because there's people that want it somewhere else far, far away to boost their town and not ours. And if that happens, it will bypass Oregon City, basically. And we will not have the opportunity to have rail service there. So
We have Union Pacific's attention right now.
yeah, well, that's
Good
another
point.
presentation. Okay.
I have a question about public right-of-way. there's a system of trails and accesses, and I wonder how you go from a privately owned industrial site to creating all that public right-of-way. What's that process?
So the way we think it will work, the bankruptcy trustee wants to sell that site as one piece. So a private, developer, private developer would purchase the site. We don't know exactly how that's going to happen or what's going to happen, but whoever ends up taking control of that site, there's a good amount of space for private development, but then in the master plan, all of that waterfront area is shown as open space. And it's in the floodplain. It's highly constrained for development. The master plan wouldn't allow development there. So it would only really make sense for a private entity to basically hand over that portion of the property to the public and let the public invest $30 million in that waterfront trail, which is only going to bring more people to that site and make it a more attractive place to have private development. So, it's not something that we propose to exact through a land use process, but we think that any development agreement that happens will include that land becoming public, so that the public can make that $30 million investment and the private side, isn't going to do that. So we think that's how it's going to happen. And we do have a development expertise and financial expertise on our consulting team, and so we're not just being naive saying that.
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment on that plant out there that it is in some books as being a native plant, but it's also native in places like Africa, and we don't know. No one's done the research to know if it's a local variant or an African one that was introduced with the aquarium trade or what. We really don't know, but it requires still water. I saw a picture from Great Britain where they were clearing it out of canals and using like a 5 or 6 foot long bucket and just pulling out, this huge mass, and they couldn't drop it because the cattle love it so much that they were underneath the bucket pulling it off. It was a pretty hilarious picture, but it gives you an idea. It's so lush that it does just choke things out, and we have to pay attention to it. But if the water was moving, it wouldn't be doing that. It wouldn't be growing there.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Oh, I just had one thought. I understand that properties in West Lynn are outside the scope of the project, but a coat of paint on the west side could do wonder. It's one thing with all this stuff that's being proposed, but if the west side of the river is a giant eyesore, it seems like it's kind of self-defeating. And I'm not trying to be facetious or anything else, but what thought or what are you guys thinking?
We've spoken with and presented to Westland Paper. So they're, keeping an eye on the process and they know what's going on. But, they're, as far as we know, they're there to stay. They're doing fine. They make a different type of paper than what they made at Blue Heron. And there's nothing that we can really do to make them improve anything. But the Westland is, they do have a project on the Bolton area plan. It's just on the other side of the bridge. That I think it's an old police station or fire station.
Okay, sure.
They're doing a redevelopment plan for that part of town. So, that could provide some impetus for Westland Paper potentially, but at least we know that that site will have a redevelopment plan as well that can benefit from Blue Heron, and Blue Heron can benefit from it.
Sure, okay.
Okay.
One question. Is there a plan for the trail to connect to the Kanema neighborhood?
So the waterfront trail would connect through the site to the spur line that goes out to Kanema. The barrier there is getting over Union Pacific rail line. So that would be that's probably a long-term project to have a overpass over the another overpass over the railroad in Kenema to connect to Old Kenema Park and then the bluffs. But another way to get there is the trail from the site, or the second trail that goes up to the promenade. So once you connect the promenade down to the site, then you can walk along sidewalks mostly, and there's that PGE property that doesn't, I think people use it, but it's not an official connection or trail. We were working with PGE on the easement for the dam, and so we also would like to work with them on that trail connection to fill that gap as well. So that's another thing, kind of another side project that we're looking at to fill in the trail gaps.
Yeah, that's the PG property that connects with Old Kenema Park.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There is a serious movement to add some property to Old Kenema that would allow trails up above to the level where the metro property is, to that street level, or even above that street level. So we don't know how that's going to come out. It's still in private ownership, but it's an ecologically valuable piece of property containing Coffee Creek. So, but there's old roads already there. Some of the oldest ones in the area, in fact. So anyway, so that's an idea.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Good job.
Thank you. Okay.
This is a modification of our current agenda.
Right.
So.
Yeah, we're going to have Martin Montalvo tell us about Gladstone Bridge falling down, I guess.
Oregon City, Gladstone.
Thanks for coming on such short notice, Martin.
No problem. Martin Montalvo, I'm the operations manager for Public Works, and I'm going to try and log on to our mapping corridor to give you guys a bit of a visual of what we're talking about. And I've got a few photos that I can share with you as part of the incident command team. I've been given access down to the actual fallen bridge. For most of you that don't know, the paper reported the other day that the bridge had actually been removed from the water. That was inaccurate. The bridge was removed from the water as of this afternoon at about 1:30.
And how many pieces, just out of curiosity?
I'm sorry?
Intact, removed, or in pieces? Or?
Yeah, I can give you some insight into that in the photos. I think will kind of give you a better idea of the process. I can tell you, without getting too far into it, what is left of the old bridge is on its way to a smelting furnace right now. The concern for all parties, including the city, primary concern from the beginning has always been public safety and trying to get that bridge down in a means that would protect both the environmental resources and the general public. So one of the first things that happened, this obviously you've all heard the backstory. Thursday morning last week, we started receiving calls that the footer on the south side, the Oregon City side of the bridge, had experienced some form of failure. What was the cause is still up for investigation. This is the Oregon City side on the south side, Gladstone side on the north side. The property that you see that fronts up on the bridge on our side, you'll see the property line is actually right here, and this is what delineates everything on this side belongs to the city of Oregon City, specifically the Urban Renewal Commission, and everything on the right side belongs to Water Environmental Services, and the property owner being the wastewater treatment plant here. The bridge was reported as failing on Thursday. Public Works, along with Parks and Recreation, came out, did initial evaluation, and we basically closed the park at both ends. We came over to the High Rocks Park over here, as well as Main Street section, and we basically isolated the perimeter. Again, primary concern being public safety. Once all the parties in the area had been advised, a pretty wide net was cast. We all convened at the Gladstone Fire Department, where we set up an incident command. The incident command consisted of Oregon City, City of Gladstone, and Union Pacific, with representatives from various departments and all those organizations. We basically devised a plan for securing the area and getting initial assessment, and then trying to come up with a action plan for taking the bridge down as safely as possible and removing it from the actual area if that was the course of action. Consideration was taken to possibly trying to preserve the bridge, but obviously that was not possible from what we have to date. One of the things that we asked of the Union Pacific organization right off the bat as they were mobilizing, it was pretty evident to everyone that if you were going to have to do any work over here based on the level of build out, this is really the only viable location for you to start staging equipment. So the city granted a use license to Union Pacific to basically use this property we refer to as the Cove, and all of the lands that belong to the city of Oregon City within here. So they currently have a license agreement with us, and they're utilizing that. They are paying a fee for the use of those properties, mainly to remediate for the cost of closing the trail down and impacts to the general public. They also are required to restore the site back to its previous state upon finishing their project on the city-owned property as well as the West-owned property. They also were given emergency clearance that based on the emergent issues that they would be allowed to remove the trees, basically incur whatever environmental impacts needed to happen in order to try and address the bridge failure. But we're advised they also, once the emergent issues are done, they would have to mitigate, and they're aware of that now. Okay, so we're in the process of working with them to try and develop an appropriate mitigation plan that'll be taken through Pete and the planning division for review and evaluation by our environmental consultant. One of the first things that we advised them on Friday morning, knowing after being on site for a day what was going to happen, we advised them to bring on an environmental consultant. They brought on CH2M Hill. It's one of the largest environmental engineering firms in the country. Very reputable. I've worked with them in the past and have full faith in their capability. They brought on an environmental scientist on site prior to any work being conducted. We basically gave them strict instructions: no one crosses the asphalt until environmental evaluation is done. And they got a preliminary baseline survey of what's out there. So they had someone come through. We've got a complete tree survey. It's not survey grade where we know the lat long of every tree, but we know the species, we know the type, we know the DBH, general count, anything 2 inches DBH or greater they were supposed to have captured within the confines of what we anticipated the impact zone was going to be. They also did a herbaceous plant analysis as well, make sure we didn't have any endangered or rare herbaceous plants in there. So that'll all come into play when we start looking at how do we get back to the benchmark that was set prior to the impact. So
I got a quick question.
Sure.
How big is the area that was actually scooped out and disrupted?
it's about the width of this room, actually. It's
Okay.
not as large a footprint. They knew that environmental impacts needed to be minimized as much as possible. They've done some value engineering, trying to figure out, what do we really need in order to get to remove the bridge. Overall, for what the footprint is over what it could have been, I think they've taken some very good measures to try and minimize that impact. They have worked with ourselves as well as Bureau of State Lands, Army Corps of Engineers, the fisheries organizations to try and minimize the impacts both to the land and the adjacent riparian area. So I think they're dealing in good faith with our organizations and are going to come back with an appropriate mitigation plan to try and restore this area. Just to share a few photos with you, if I can get access to my hard drive here, which it won't allow me to do without logging in as myself. We do have some photos that were just taken today. The process that they came up with for safely felling the bridge itself. If you can think of the bridge basically as this notepad, what had happened was that the trusses that come down and basically join to the footer on the Oregon City side, that got undercut, and then the pilings that are on top of that basically dropped. Because the bridge is suspended at 4 points and that happened, the entire bridge basically torsioned like this. The spans across the top snapped in the middle of the night, and the neighbors thought, oh, what happened? Came out the next morning, saw what happened. So the plan was to bring in heavy equipment. Basically, they've got 3 D9 dozers out there, which are very big, about $2 million a piece. And those are the anchors. And those D9 dozers are all acting as the anchors for a single hydraulic winch. So think of a winch that you have on the front of your car, only this one is the size of your car. And those anchors are holding the winch in place. The winch has several spools of cable that come out and are grabbing onto the girders onto the front of the bridge. So if you were approaching from the Oregon City side, they're grabbing those girders. And what they did to fell the bridge was basically put equal levels of pressure on all of the girders and slid it forward until it dropped. So that's how we got the controlled drop, which was actually very effective.
Yeah. Did the both upright cement things go down?
Yeah, all of them are down. All of the pilings are all down, and
what's going to happen with those?
They're out of the water now.
Already?
Yeah. Almost all the material's out of the water right now. There's a few submerged items which they're in the process of possibly removing tomorrow, I believe. But almost 90% of all the materials have been removed from the area. So the plan was, once you get it down, use the same equipment, pull it up and slide it up across the bank. So basically the impact area is just slightly larger than the width of the bridge itself. So you slide it up onto the bank. And then what they did with a piece of equipment that's referred to as the splicer is, as you pull it up, you cut sections of it off and put it aside, reset your cables, pull it up, cut sections, pull it up, cut sections. So what remains of the Oregon City Gladstone Bridge is large chunks of steel that have been set aside, and most of it has been transported to the smelter by now, I believe.
What do you estimate the weight of the bridge to
I have no idea.
Pardon?
I have no idea.
No idea.
I couldn't even speculate on that. So that's basically all I have to share with you. Without being able to access my drive here, I had a couple photos that I was going to try and show you guys. But I'm not going to log on to here from my drive. It's a little cumbersome at times. I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys might have. In terms of a timeline for reparations and mitigation, I do not have that yet. Everything is still preliminary. We've just got out of the emergency phase of the disaster, or I shouldn't say disaster, of the event. And then we're moving into what we refer to as recovery. So within the next few days, we've already spoken to their environmental consultants and their engineering consultants and advised them where we would like to speak to XYZ, and we need to be produced with copies of their erosion control plan, their proposed mitigation plan, as well as the preliminary site assessment and tree survey that we had requested.
You mentioned earlier that the mitigation plan would go to the planning staff, et cetera. I would hope that this committee would have a chance to look at it. That certainly seems like something we should do.
At this point, we would treat it as a Type 2 Natural Resource Overlay District review. For review of the mitigation plan, which would also be reviewed by our out-of-house water resource consultant, David Evans and Associates. So it follows standard land use procedure, and we want to bring that before the Natural Resources Committee.
And I want to thank you for taking the lead. I don't know all the people involved, but on Thursday we were told to evacuate our area because a 6 to 10 foot wall of water could happen if it rolled on its side, which could have been possible at that time. And the other thing I was
6 to 10 foot, but
that's what they're saying.
Yeah.
They're really scared.
We took every precaution, and even to this, even to this hour, we still have the park closed.
Right.
The predominant concern for all parties has been public safety from the onset.
Right. And I just wanted to thank you for being so cognizant of that.
No problem.
This thing goes back for me 14 years when I called that bridge out as to its condition, along with some other people were really worried about it then. And the governor's office, if you're not aware of this, intervened and pumped concrete underneath the abutment that failed now to try to stop it. And then 12 years or so pass and nothing gets done. And Can you give any observations on the caisson that seems to be failing at the upriver pump station for construction?
I don't have any information to pass on with that.
It
That-
seems to be the steel is
yeah,
leaning
that's
out
the
more
steel
every day.
pilings that they had poured, or they had pile drived in place for the construction of the new intake for
Yes.
Lake Oswego,
Yes.
Tigard. The pilings, while they've shifted, appear to be holding. I know they're currently they're back constructing as of
Okay.
Monday. They essentially had a 1.5 day shutdown because of the bridge issue.
Oh.
But I do not have any information in regards to the conditions of those piling. I know they wouldn't be constructing if they weren't considered to
Yeah.
be safe.
And my understanding on that is that they were above the river water level on the laying of the cement, so that actually they weren't as needed at that once they're above that level.
I believe I'd heard something about that.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
Is there any chance of any kind of regulatory action against the railroad just for letting stuff get to this point? I mean, I don't know what agency or anything. I was just curious.
Yeah, I really couldn't speak to that. This meeting is recorded,
right.
and in terms of for punitive penalty actions by any agency, including the city, is not something that I'm versed or capable of speaking about.
Okay. Yeah, I do have photos I took August 31st, 2012, where you're looking underneath 6 feet of that pier at that point in time. So it's been, and the railroad was aware of that at that time. So that is, I can share those pictures with you if you'd like. So.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Yeah.
In terms of this city,
Yeah.
we've got an agreement with Union Pacific that the impacts associated with this, and really comparatively in terms of the danger and the hazard to each of the adjacent municipalities, the danger to us was much less. We didn't have any adjacent residents, no homes or other structures or collateral damage that could occur. The lead for this event was the city of Gladstone, and we were there as, what do you guys need? We are here to support. So we have an agreement in place with Union Pacific that they'll make reparations for any of the damage to the properties owned by ourselves and by Wes, and that we're going to operate in good faith and towards of restoring the area in its environmental condition.
Yeah, they certainly addressed the problem quickly.
Very quickly.
Yeah.
Very impressed.
I will agree with that. I had no idea that it would be done in 5 days. So, they will still be out on site for probably at least the remainder of this week, possibly longer, just with the emergent issues. We foresee that the actual restoration effort will take considerably longer. But I do know they're eager to try and get whatever they can resolved as soon as possible. Okay. If there aren't any questions, I'll thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Mark.
Okay.
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Okay. We've got the election of NRC officers.
Okay, so at the beginning of every year, we are to elect our offices, and we're a little behind schedule, but we had some staggered terms and vacancies that we needed to take care of. So we have 3 offices pursuant to our bylaws in Article 5. We have a chair who has general supervisory and directional powers over the committee, who presides at meetings and reviews agendas with staff. They are the designated spokesperson for the committee unless this responsibility is delegated to another party. Then we have our vice chair. In the absence of the chair, the vice chair has those responsibilities. And then we have a secretary, which is sort of an honorary title now at this point in time because we have a paid transcriptionist who's doing our minutes for us. That being said, there are some duties that a secretary still can take care of in terms of transferring information from this committee to other bodies as needs be, and I think it's an important position as a spokesperson and liaison for the committee. Currently, Brian is our chair and Shaw is our vice chair, and we do not currently have an acting secretary. So with that, I would leave it open to anyone who wants to discuss these openings and
I
nominations.
personally think things are working out really well.
Okay. And is anyone, I'd basically like to just open it up, see if anybody is interested in any of the positions. And I'm willing to continue as chair. If anyone is not willing to continue, I'd like to know that as well. And if anybody wants to put their name in on any of the positions, then please do so. Okay? So,
Well, due to a whole lot of extraneous circumstances, I think it's not appropriate for me to continue as vice chair this year. So I'm going to suggest that perhaps Jerry Herman might take that position.
I would be willing to do that, yes.
Okay. So,
I'm not willing to look at the chairmanship because of my eyesight.
Oh, okay.
But with the aid of,
Written.
Brian's
Yeah.
work that he does, plus he and I talk a lot, I just feel like we're at kind of a crossroads now, and we need to solve some issues here if this committee is going to be effective. And we have new members coming on, which I appreciate, Ginger. But I'm seriously wondering how we can become more effective and perceived such. So yes, I would be willing to be a candidate for vice chair.
okay.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay.
Do you want to take votes on this, or do you want to do a consensus type thing?
We can, since there's no contested things, we can go ahead and do consensus. And so, since there's no other nominations, we have,
Is there any volunteering for the secretary? I'll
yeah,
just put that out there.
yeah, just in case.
Well, all right, if you need a secretary,
All
I'll
right,
do
there
it.
you go. There's Ginger. All right, good deal. Finally, Pete gets some help here.
I will give you every support I can.
All right. So
Thank
that-
you.
At this point, that doesn't necessarily include doing minutes, but it does include doing communications. So,
Yeah.
Do we have
So
any
that's a-
guidance on that, just like
Yeah.
what and when, just to, not leave her in the dark?
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, it's
yeah,
very
when we-
general.
yeah, it's pretty general right now. When we need to communicate with, say, another body, then
Yeah, I
we
mean,
need to
that's-
draft a letter, and there would be assistance with that, plus, if you're at the meetings where they come up, they'll be discussed ahead of time.
And I think since we have a more formalized, it's not perfect yet, as we know, but we have a more formalized process to provide recommendations as a body, which is a written recommendation, and how that gets transferred up to Parks and Rec Advisory Committee, City Commission, and Planning Commission. I think the secretary can assist in that transference of information, and we have a template for that. But I will, I'll be there to help in the drafting of any kind of recommendations that can come forward from this body. So that's not in our bylaws, but that's something that we're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, implementing as needed. So,
Right.
okay.
Well, thank
So-
you, Ginger.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm hoping if more of us are taking an active role, our ability to make a contribution will be perceived as more
Yeah.
significant.
Yeah. Yeah, we are, a small board, and but splitting up the work is good.
Great. Excellent.
Okay, so we have Ginger as secretary, Jerry as vice chair, and Brian as chair yet again. And is there any further discussion, nominations, or volunteer efforts in that direction? And hearing none, I'm going to consider that slate accepted by consensus.
Thank you. Congratulations, everybody.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I told Brian I have to leave here, unfortunately, for something that's a proceeding tomorrow I'm involved in really early in the morning. But I left with Brian my thoughts about the tree recommendation and some thoughts about our goals. And then I'm leaving him another note here regarding the preamble. I'm sorry I have to leave, vote and leave, but I'm sorry, I just have to. I'm involved in something that's really important. I got to go meet with my staff right now, so. All right. So Brian's got my comments, if you'll allow him to present them.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Okay, I'll write that
Thanks,
in.
Jerry.
Thanks, Jerry.
Yeah, we'll see you. Okay, so we've got staff reports, and as these come up, I will mention what he said and all that.
Okay. So it looks like we're on to old business, right? And
Yeah, there was, well, actually, staff report was that one. Okay, we're all the way down to, yeah, you're all the way down to old business. That's
Right.
right. And,
I'll try to bring everybody up to speed, since there have been some of us absent, but in January meeting, Carol came and graciously started to assist us with our goal setting and prioritization process. And I will just try to find my staff report here. I had sent an email out with some crib notes, where we talked about the draft minutes from the January the 8th meeting. And we also reviewed the tape from the January the 8th meeting. And so we had started to look at possible revisions to the scope of activities in the NRC bylaws. I talked with Carol. Thank you, Carol, if you'd like to come up and introduce yourself. And I'll just briefly try to summarize that discussion from January the 8th. Some of the fundamentals and foundations that the committee wanted to be, you wanted to be part of a process, you want to be trusted, you want to be informed, you want to be respected, and you want to have a voice and have meaning. And all of this needs to occur in a timely manner. There is a need for better communication, and when communication doesn't occur, some of those things don't happen. Carol had started to look at our scope of activities, which we all agree is very broad, and try to help us refine those into a more attainable set of goals and activities. Preferably only 3 per year, I think, is what we were talking about. And we can define what those are and swap them out and change them for others as needs be. And coming out of that, there were essentially 4 top goals, which are promoting community involvement, reviewing updates to the comprehensive plan, commenting on land use applications, and coordinating with PRAC. And there are certainly going to be others. Some of the Article 4 scope of activities that we decided that we probably don't want to be responsible for are number 2, number 5, and number 8. And I'm not going to go into details on what those are, but we can talk about that. Some of the new activities that the committee would like to undertake are understanding current policies and codes affecting natural resources, and then again, continuing to comment on land use applications that have the potential to significantly affect natural resources, coordinating better with other committees, and possibly looking at the roles of subcommittees in the NRC to take on certain things, such as land use, etc. We do not have an action plan yet. That would be determined once we have an agreed upon structure and foundation. We also heard that there needs to be thresholds for certain communications. So at what point should there be communication on vital issues, whether those issues are routine maintenance of parks or routine maintenance of public works lands, public lands in general, what constitutes a threshold for notice to the NRC, and what sort of decision is going to be made at that point. The role of other departments in the decision-making process needs to be well understood by everybody. There's also the land use decision-making authority that is prescribed in the code. Some decisions are type 2 staff level decisions, some decisions are planning commission type 3, some decisions are called type 4 or legislative actions, and those are all things that the city attorney can help us understand through a land use 101 tutorial, which we like to do for all new members. And that is a very incomplete summary of what was discussed on January 8th, so I apologize. And with that, I'd like to introduce Carol and kick off the discussion. Thank you very much for coming back.
I'm Carol Kennis. I'm a resident of Oregon City. And I have to say, I'm again amazed by what you do and what the city does. And watching the process before us, it was overwhelming to see what is going on in our city. So thank you to all of you and to the city.
You're welcome.
So we had a busy month. We had a busy meeting in January, and a lot was brought out. Nothing was really decided, and that's, thank you. We talked a lot about what we wanted, how we felt, how you felt, and now we need to come up to what is the next step. There are now 2 members missing again tonight, and this is really important that everybody's here. So I don't know if we want to go forward and talk about what we talked about in January and kind of go to the next steps, or if we want to make a meeting where everybody's here, and that is the sole purpose of that meeting, is to really nail down what our preamble, what our vision is, what our goal, and then an action plan. And that's a lot of work. So you as a committee need to decide, do we want to get that done in a short amount of time, or do we want to kind of stretch it out, which would be over, 4 or 5 meetings, and that's a long process. So it's really up to you, because we really need everybody here.
Yeah, I think this is a critical point. We've said it from the outset that we need everybody here. And I understand people are busy, but this is something that we all need to commit to as a committee, staff, and especially when we have a third party volunteering to help us out. I think it's been a very open and good process, and I think it continues to be. So
I've got a question, I think, and thinking back through January, I can see what we're talking about with the mission statement and the activities we'd like to undertake. What I'm not clear about is, in earlier discussions, we had very specific things certain members were wanting to work on and do things, and I'm not seeing that reflected here. I'm thinking of things like the dark skies.
Sure.
So this looks like, kind of I won't say a given list of what we'd be doing anyway,
Right.
but it seems, I'm thinking of stuff like Jerry's bus tour last year. I don't see how that activity fits under the headings or the content the way it's described here tonight. So, I guess I'm concerned because it seems like this would be like a list that would be put together by the city if the city was like totally, it's kind of like a generic list that doesn't look like it reflects the input or interests or activities of the individual members.
Okay.
So, it's something, it looks like a kind of a top-down list.
I don't want it to be that way. I want it to come from you all.
Well, but that's what I'm trying to say is I'm not seeing.
Well, that's one of the reasons we're trying to get everybody under one roof at one time to just go through these details, and
Sure.
Jerry is continuing with those bus tours,
Right.
But it's not necessarily a goal unto itself. It's one of the an expression of one of these goals.
And
Yeah.
you see, that's
Yeah.
that's good, but I guess what I'm trying to say is based on the way I'm reading the goals and seeing the stuff here, it's hard to read how it fits in. That's
Right.
if there's, and that's why I'm thinking stuff like the dark skies or other things.
Yeah.
How do specific kind of issues that members are interested in, want to have the city address fit in when you just have 3 or 4 things that seem kind of generic, kind of internally focused.
Right. I think that, I was focusing more on goals and not activities. And and I was trying to summarize what I heard at the last meeting. So certainly.
Ms. Roth, possibly if we wrote these goals in a way that we could add those activities, that would be part of the action plan. And just a suggestion, promoting community involvement, that you could expand that to, open, involving community for activities within the city to enhance natural resources.
Because what I'm seeing is activities are listed on the second page, are pretty tightly tied to the goals at the bottom of the
Right.
first page.
And the dark sky one is already in our scope of activities. It's number 11, and it's really a question of moving forward with understanding the existing code and deciding how to improve them. Recommending methods to protect the night sky through reduction of light pollution. That's in our bylaws.
Right. But what I'm saying is, I'm just kind of looking as the way we've got the stuff formatted here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's two different things we're trying to do, is have a more generic set of goals that everything else falls under.
Okay.
That would be inclusive enough, and we may not have a perfect job done yet. That's why we're meeting.
Sure.
And, but, like she was mentioning, if you have a goal of community involvement, having bus tours would fit right under that.
Sure.
And, and so would any other tour or encouraging people to come to our meetings. There's a lot of ways that could be expressed. And it's writing it so that we can get inspiration from that initial goal setting, that we can think of these things in respect to those goals. Because everything we do, ideally, in an ideal committee and world, would fit under our goals. And if they don't, we haven't done a good enough job setting those goals up.
So some comments I have here on fundamentals and foundations. The NRC wishes to be. I think the fundamentals and foundations would arise out of the proposed preamble, which basically discusses our values and what we value and what we want to do. So connecting that to the preamble is a relatively important thing, because that way the committee determines what is it we really value and want to do. In looking at that, Jerry put together just did this today, some thoughts about what that might be. Becoming conscientious stewards of the natural environment in a manner that best achieves a beneficial balance between the needs of people and the needs of the natural environment now and for future generations. That drives a lot of action. It drives a lot of function. One of the fundamentals and foundations that I see here, and I'm sorry I missed the last meeting, I would like to add the word effective, that the NRC wishes to be effective. We want to have our actions and the things we do make a difference. And I think that is what is missing in our current situation. So, yes, we want to be part of a process. Yes, we want to be trusted and informed and respected and heard, but we want to be effective. So I think that is really the driving verb of what it is we're seeking perhaps to be here. Just a thought. In moving into the goals, developing the top 3 goals into a mission statement, I suppose are we calling that mission statement the preamble, or is that different?
Well, that's up to you. You can do it either way or both. Your preamble kind of says what your philosophy is, what's your heart, and then your vision is kind of narrows it a little bit, and then your goals support that vision. Or you can just go with the preamble.
Okay, on option number 2 here, we have to become natural resource stewards. That's really, if you're going to put it down to a few words, that would be it right there. And our goals would be, how are we going to do that? And our activities are actual things on the ground that we're actually going to do to implement our goals, which are here to implement this preamble statement, in a sense.
The whole idea is it all supports each other.
Right.
And so then you build
Yeah.
from that.
Yeah, it's sort of like a pyramid in a way. You've got the preamble at the top and goals, and then your implementation of the goals. Which
Your
are all the
action
different
plan.
activities that we possibly could become involved in.
But I think you said it right earlier, Brian, that there's 2 different kinds of things we're talking about here.
Right.
One of them is really, you can call it what you want, but I think of it as defining the committee. Why does it exist? What's it trying to accomplish? And that's something that would stay the same through time. I think when we looked back at the original resolution here, we saw that there was some flaws and some uncertainties and even what looked like some errors in it. So now we're trying to rewrite what this committee is and what it's responsible for doing. And then over here you've got annual action plans, those would be different from year to year. We take on new projects and all of that, all consistent with the mission of the committee. But the mission of the committee, if we write it correctly, shouldn't change through time, I don't think.
To use an example that's already been brought up is if we help the city implement dark sky ordinances, then that drops off our agenda. It's still something that we would want to cover if it ever needed to be, but hopefully we can get something. And PGE actually on their own started installing much improved lighting in that respect on their own because it was cheaper for them to run. And so economics is helping us, but we still have more to do because there's a lot of old, a lot of business people don't pay enough attention to know they could save $100 a month on electricity by installing dark sky lighting, and they don't know that yet. And getting that news out might be something we want to take on.
And that'd be an activity, right?
That would
And
be
that's an activity, yes.
But
Okay.
yeah, so our goal is to, we may or may not have dark sky itself as a goal, but it would be at least under another goal to improve the environment in some fashion, and it can definitely be a project we want to take on.
So one of the things I think we can do in changing the goals, adding to these goals, number 2 says review updates to the comprehensive plan. My suggestion is that we say review and recommend changes to the comprehensive plan and city codes, so that anything like a dark sky initiative, or we find a section in one of the city codes about something that we feel would be better and more in keeping with becoming natural stewards and implementing and integrating that into the city's codes, we would make recommendations. So we don't just understand stuff. In order to be effective, we're making recommendations and taking those recommendations to the Planning Commission and the City Commission for approval.
To a different level. Now, I need to ask Pete, when you hear that, is that something that is doable in our city codes already, and that they could be an active part of that?
Yes. Code changes occur several ways. They occur whenever there's a legislative review of the city's comprehensive plan, such as when a sewer master plan is updated, or a water master plan is updated, or a concept plan is proposed for adoption. Whenever those happen, a legislative file is created that goes from the Planning Commission to the City Commission, but prior to that, it goes through public process, natural resources, citizen advisory bodies, and neighborhood associations. So before it ever gets to the public hearing process. And that's the time where you're really getting a sense of what people think ought to stay the same or what ought to change. Then there's comprehensive plans reviews that are mandated by the state of Oregon whenever the city is behind on its comprehensive plan. They do say you need to do periodic review, which technically is supposed to be every 5 years, but no city in Oregon is keeping on a 5-year schedule because of the difficulty and the cost of doing that.
Probably takes 6 years to do it.
So our last one was 2003, and the NRC was created in 2002, I believe. So, and the NRC had a big role in reviewing the goals and policies of the comp plan at that time. And
it seems like there's two
But-
different things
and
here.
then the codes that go along with that.
When you get these automatic reviews that the city has to do,
Yeah.
we want to be involved with those, and that's.
Sure.
But then, we could also, given our superior level of free time, look at the existing codes and see if there are
Yeah.
things that we think ought to be changed.
Right.
So those are two different processes.
Right.
One where we're going along with the city on something that's already up for review, and the other one is we're looking for things that might want to get altered or changed.
Yeah.
From our
A code
standpoint.
book about this thick?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
then
I
there
know.
are.
I know. See,
Just check.
and
But
that-
we've done this before.
Yes.
I've been on the committee that
Yes.
did this before, and we each took a section and we
Yeah.
reviewed it and we made recommended changes. We brought it to the group. We said yes, no, and it was a massive process, but it is doable.
And I would point out that the code does have sections that are very specific to natural resources.
Right. It wouldn't be the whole thing.
You know, those are something that staff is providing updates on from when time permits, you know, because we have the Natural Resources Overlay District, which is one chapter. We have this tree protection ordinance, which is another chapter. We have the public tree chapter, which is a separate chapter. And we have the geologic hazard overlay zone.
Yeah.
That's 4, but there are others. And they all affect natural resources in some way.
Yeah, and there's requirements like for retention basins and things like that.
Stormwater, right.
Yeah, which results in land that the city maintains, and, you know, that are not really natural areas, but you know, depends on how you manage them.
Yeah.
Can I just say one thing, Mr. Rothman? I guess my question is, if this committee does that, and they put in one of their goals as reviewing updates to the comprehensive plan, is that doable to the city? Is that a goal that the city can uphold too? Because if they go to all this work and then it's really not something that can happen, it doesn't make sense to make it a goal. And I think that's something we have to be realistic about.
There probably needs to be some language there about the timing, because it really can occur independently. It can occur when there is money and resources to devote to doing those ordinances in a comprehensive way. So I don't know quite how to phrase that in writing. Maybe we can come up with that.
What's happened before is there's been goals, and the committee has thought one way, and then that goal was interpreted another way.
Yeah.
And that's where I think some of the disconnect was. And you need to make sure that whatever goal you write, the city can uphold their side also. Does that make sense?
So it's part of a scope of activities. I think if this committee decides they want to concentrate on looking at a particular section of code, great. You can start to work on that. And then can we adopt it in a timely manner right after the committee recommends approval? I don't know. We may have to wait until a legislative file is open, such as the sign code or South End or something like that, which may take a few months,
But then they'd be ready. But then it'd be
Heritage
ready.
Tree Code is a perfect example. It hasn't gone up to the Planning Commission yet because we knew we had a whole bunch of code to open up and look at, and we're like, we have to do a Measure 56 notice to every property owner in the city whenever we do code change. That costs $10,000 each time. So there's a cost, but it's doable. Yeah.
Mr. Rothman.
Sure. I think maybe one way to look at this is a lot of organizations, you have regular ongoing activities. So like year in, year out, based on the mandate, you carry out certain activities. And so if you consider a certain set of these, not so much to be part of a mission statement, but year in, year out, we're going to be responding to a certain set of activities. But I think what we're looking at is if we're ever going to be proactive or provide leadership, we don't just take the role of waiting for something to come to us and do stuff. I think what we want to look at is where can we be proactive, where we can provide leadership, and that's going to be actually taking the initiative and figure out what should the city be doing, what should we be getting people
The front
involved,
end.
and not just waiting to be directed, look at this now, what's your feedback, look at that. So I think maybe there's a balance between, well, not really so much balance, but there are things that we will be doing year in, year out, and that's just part of the basic workload. But I think we need to figure out, based on priorities and impacts, what should we be doing over and above that minimum based on the characteristics of the city, the environment, what have you. So that's where I think I was coming in and looking at tying everything just down to the year in, year out without looking at where can we provide leadership, how do we get people really involved. And it's not just going to be by doing the kind of run-the-mill stuff we do year in, year out. It's going to be by, just like stuff that's going on Blue Heron. It's a whole different level of stuff. It's a different kind of challenge. So I think we need to figure out what is it that we need to do more than what we have to do.
Spady?
Yes. I didn't think I had anything to say until I got here. It seems to me that if we're going to become natural resource stewards, a part of our fundamentals and foundations is we wish to be educators as well, and that when we were reviewing the comprehensive plan and the city codes before, we felt one of the issues in our culture, in our society, and one of the reasons our natural resources and their stewardship and protection are so separated from what we see happening is because we think of them as separate things. We have a code for natural resource protection. We have a code for the overlay zone. We have a code for this. But what we tried to do, and what I think is an important part of the education and effectiveness of this group, is to assist people in understanding that everything we do, whether it's design a building height or how we look at what we're doing through our language and how we talk about it, is going to determine how we relate to the environment and the world that supports us. And so by just adding the word or two words to every aspect of the comprehensive plan, here and there a word, what it tended to do is to just broaden the way we would look at what we're doing. And so language becomes very important in that respect, and integrating those little dollops of language throughout the process, throughout the codes, throughout the comprehensive plan, and then showing how that could occur was what we felt at that time, and that was the basis of this committee. It's not like I'm talking into the air about why this committee exists. That was our goal when we created the Natural Resource Committee, when we wrote the bylaws, and when we sought to be integrated into the city in an effective way. So I think it's really important that we be allowed to not only review updates to the comprehensive plan, but review and recommend changes in terms of activities, understand and recommend changes to current policies, not just understand them, but be able to make and recommend language changes to policies and codes, just to show if you were really looking at becoming, as a city, natural resource stewards, this is the language and the way you would look at the natural resources. It's a shift. It's, the paradigm shift conversation. So I just think it's essential that somewhere in here we, as Bob was saying, we become proactive and we become educators as well as commenters and understanders.
And again, you can do that in all of those areas. You
Yes.
can, in your preamble, that can be a voice. In your goals, that can be a voice. And then in your activities.
Mm-hmm.
I need to ask the question again because I want to make sure we're
Yeah.
all on that same path. Mr. Walter, would that be, as you hear Ms. Spady, is that something that you believe the city could also embrace?
Yeah.
That we just need to make sure we keep doing those checks because we don't want to go down a path when it's not realistic.
I think it's a totally appropriate thing to take our work product and say, this is the focus of this committee. This is what this committee really wants to do. Take it to the city commission before we've done it all. Take it to the people at the top who are basically going to say yes or no and say, is this something the city can support? Because if not, we're not going to waste our time doing it.
Right.
But if so, we're going to put more into it and we're going to do a good job for you.
And that seems to a very good plan to do that. Is that something that you think would be?
Are we talking about code language or, because,
We're talking about, I think, their whole idea of coming up with
Yeah.
their preamble, their
Oh, the
goals,
preamble,
their action
certainly,
plan,
yeah, absolutely.
and then
Yeah.
as they form that in
Right.
draft
Into
form,
implementation.
in draft form, before they, really put their stamp on it, we want to make sure that the commission, the city, everybody understands. Is that right? Am I getting a thumbs up, thumbs I'm not sure?
See, I think
Yeah.
it's important, like, this committee has the authority to change their own bylaws. And, they just need a quorum to do it. And that's really what we're talking about.
Right.
To me.
Right.
This is the guiding document. This can be rearranged and rephrased and have more powerful language and more restorative language about natural resources in it. And I think this is, and if you act as a group and make the recommendation to the city commission, they will be signing a new resolution.
Yeah,
you
I
know.
think
Yeah.
one of the things Shaw is saying is this, the education idea of educating. Education can be really broad. It's infinite almost, and we can start with the city itself, but our group is also authorized to pursue grants, and there are substantial environmental and education grants out there right now. And we could get those if we so desired. You have to partner with other groups, which there's groups out there that would jump at the chance of partnering with our organization to do an environmental program that would benefit the city and the park system and so on. And there's parks that are getting rehabilitation grants right now, or they're being applied for, and those themselves would be educational tools once that work's done, especially. Also before the work's done, so you can see the change. And so the opportunities are there, but I think that we have to be aware of education as a goal, and that needs to be in this list.
Yeah, and turn it around, the Nature in the Neighborhoods restoration grants have as a key requirement for getting the grant that you do community education and outreach, and that it is as far reaching into your community as you can get it.
Yeah, and they also give grants, the same body, just for education projects.
Right, exactly.
And, separate from the rehabilitation grants, but I think they ideally go together.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I can make one idea
Sure.
of which a proposal. Part of the thing is you have a series of kind of like environmental challenges or opportunities, but it's difficult because you have different constituencies that favor different activities, but there's no way to prioritize. There's no way to kind of really do an assessment. If this committee could help put together kind of like an environmental assessment, maybe in partnership with Portland State, to help us make sure we've identified what is the universe, what's going on, what's going to be happening in the future, and that way if we're going for grants or doing things, we can say the reason we're going for the A as opposed to B is because this is the condition the city's in right now. This is how we anticipate changing with maybe greater population or climate change.
I have to admit, I just attended a workshop on applying for Metro grants last night. So one of the things they require is that you show how this grant is implementing goals. And that's one of the important things about us writing goals, is that those are the goals we're going to implement with the grant.
If you're going to write grants, that's the first thing they're going to look at is what are your organizational goals and
what
does it
what
pertain to
goals
that?
does the city have, or Metro have, or
But you're having goals because you're trying to address some kind of condition. You're
Right.
trying to achieve some kind of outcome.
right.
And so how do we demonstrate or prove that the outcomes that we're going towards are significant? Because it's
Well,
competitive.
that's part of writing a grant, too. Say if you decide you're going to educate 8th graders on environmental subjects, your goal is to say, we reached X number of 8th graders, educated them, sent them home, they educated their parents, and the world is a better place. And it fulfilled this goal that the Natural Resource Committee or Metro or whichever,
It has
or
evidence
all
to prove
of
it.
the above.
Right.
And so you tie it into what the community as a whole needs. But
Exactly.
you need written things to say you can't just say, well, it'd be really nice to educate 8th graders in the environment. You can say the city of Oregon City sees this as an important goal, or the NRC sees this as an important goal.
And you
Hopefully
can't
all of
lose-
the above,
And I feel very strongly that you start with a small project and you succeed, and then you create another project and you succeed,
Yeah,
and you target it. You don't get overwhelmed by the holistic, because all of our natural areas that are city-owned are in bad shape to a large extent because of invasive species. There are some exceptions, but we have our pick in terms of restoration grant possibilities. Yeah,
Everything you're talking about, what I'm hearing, is an element of number one, which would be your first goal, promoting community involvement.
in a sense, yeah.
And that's what we're talking about. That you have goals that really do overlay and they really can encompass many things, many activities, many passions, but you have a driving force. Ms. Spady?
I'm going to make the recommendation that we get together in an informal setting with the famous board, and we just process through this, because we've got a really good foundation that you just guide us, if you're willing to, through sort of clarifying what's a goal, what's a this, what's a that, and coming up with something that we can formalize to bring back at even the next meeting, if that's possible. I think that's the most effective way to use your expertise to coordinate all the things we're saying in a really organized way. And
Thank you, and I agree.
Yeah.
I think we're
Yeah.
at that point.
Yeah.
And so, but we really need everybody here.
Yeah.
And I can't emphasize that enough, just because I'm afraid if you don't have someone that's not here and they're not a part of that, when they come, then they feel like they've been left out.
That's
Mr.
right.
DeHart?
Well, I disagree in a way. I mean, not that we don't want to involve everybody and have everybody committed and buy in, but we'll always be struggling with not having everybody sitting in every seat at every discussion. So I think it's very important, just as you suggested, that early in this process, we get a working draft document. It can be real rough, all that stuff, but something that we can share both among the people in a discussion, but also give to the people who weren't able to join that discussion so they can give us feedback right away. I think that's a very important tool to move this thing forward, all working on the same document. As rough and drafty and conceptual as it might be, I don't think that even matters,
Right.
just so we're all engaged with it.
Well, at one time, Ms. Beatty, you said, had volunteered that you would be willing to bring this together. Are you still willing to do that?
Well, part of what's happened is life has happened. So I've had relatives die. I'm in charge of their stuff. The levels of expanded responsibility have grown, not gotten smaller. So I am more than willing to participate in even having the group at my house, being as effective as I can and delineating it on paper. So really all that maybe our secretary has to do is type it up.
So may I make a suggestion that we do, if we take you up on that, and those that can come, attend that meeting. The goal is to come out with a draft of just what we're talking about, our preamble, mission statement, goals, and then even start some maybe activities that we already know that are important to the group, and that we make that part of the plan. And it's a draft, knowing that it's a draft, and that the group, you, can change that as needed. Is that, Mr. Roth?
Two things I was going to add. One thing, Pete, I think would be helpful is on the stuff that's kind of like ongoing responsibilities.
Sure.
If we had a 1 to 2 year kind of projection of demands that might be placed on this, I'm not sure, Blue Herons is appropriate. Like now we know with the trolley bridge going down and like a mitigation plan, if that's going to be coming through us, because part of I think workload management is anticipating that.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We know, like over
Yeah.
the next 2 years, these are things coming down the pipelines. These are roughly within 2 or 3
I
months.
could create a list now, and then it would, it would rapidly become rather.
Yeah, but at least, because basically, if we're going to tackle any new things,
Well,
or be
yeah.
proactive,
Yeah.
it's going to be with whatever discretionary time and
Sure.
energy is left after doing the things that are kind of expected of us to accomplish.
Well, I think it'll help us with this other task too, because you see what happens, and when we get into this, we quickly, each of us lights on some pet thing we want to see
Yeah.
happen, and it's important, but it's not the
Right.
decade-long strategy of the committee. It's something that belongs in this year's action plan or next
Work
year's
plan,
action
next
plan.
plan.
But if we
Yeah.
start building those lists at the same time, then when those ideas come up, we've got a place to put them.
Yeah.
We can put them there and then get on with this basic structure.
And I think you want to build the structure first, because then if those activities didn't fit in that structure, then you have to ask yourself, is this where we want to go? And so when you build the structure, if you build it, they will come. You
Yeah.
need to build it and then see where all these activities fit.
And I think this time last year, we were reviewing a work plan, which is really an activities list. And it's,
Yes.
it needs to be updated. Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
that's an ongoing thing we need to do every year.
I
Mr.
like,
Ms.
I like
Wegman?
where we're at, and what I like the list of the duties and the scope of activities, and I can see where we need to do a little bit more with that. What I've just kind of pinned in a follow-up to the preamble, which is, it's a nice preamble of why, we start with why. Why are we important? What contribution do we have to make? And then option 1 or 2 is fine. And then I thought a mission statement might sound something like this. This is just a draft, and it helps me focus on the activities. Our mission to achieve the above, the Oregon City Natural Resource Committee will promote activities that actively engage citizens of all ages in maintaining, preserving, and learning about Oregon City's rich natural resources. Goals that reflect this vision are, by 2016, identify 4 natural areas that we can educate, do promotional activities, and get citizens engaged with it. Develop materials through partnerships and grants to educate and engage in these activities, and reduce invasive species by 10%. I mean, it was something that goes from that to that to that, which falls under these duties, but at the same time gets to our goal of what we'd like to do, actively involved, proactively out there, and then when giving also at the same time, simultaneously, while we're working on these activities, when reviewing the comprehensive plan, reviewing the other activities as they come up. But so we can do both at the same time.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back to Miss Spavey. If we could take you up on that, because we could be here all night. And if everybody bring with you, think about what it is that you want in that mission statement, and then we've already gone over this list that you've done, and we've narrowed it down to 3 or 4. If come thinking, is this what we want as our goals, and then what would that look like?
I think the challenge of getting everybody involved would be trying to find the dates that kind of work for us, because a lot of people, have commitments even months in advance, and we need to.
Well, it's really probably best to try to do it at our regular meetings, because everybody's got that on their calendar, and that doesn't always help.
It's also where the public expects to find us making deliberations and decisions. I mean, we can do it elsewhere off-site, but if we're deliberating towards a decision, we have to provide public notice.
It off-site, however.
Recording, I mean, that's an issue. There are ways.
There are ways.
Yeah, it can be, we'd have to, the reason we do things here is because it's cost-effective, we have the facilities,
Right.
and it meets Oregon Public Meetings Law.
Yeah.
So, that's one way. Off-site, we can do tape recordings and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
If people are willing to make a commitment for half a day, I think the part of the challenge we have doing it as part of this meeting format is simply, like, we had a meeting in January, then stuff comes up, now we're meeting again, and with the changes in participation, it's, you think if you had 4 hours, that could be like maybe 3 months worth of activities on the agenda in 1 half day, as opposed to stretching it out over a fourth of a year or something like that. So, and again, I know people are busy too and have a lot of other commitments. I'm just trying to think of how do you make sustained progress where you're actually able to do more than planning, like from 1 month to the next. And it seems like it's a time investment. And I'm busy, like other people are busy too, but if we could just lock in a time saying we're starting here at the end of, by after lunch or something, we're there, and actually get on with stuff. Otherwise, who knows next month what the agenda's like, and we make it like a little B step, and another one, we could be at it for a long time.
Well, I also want to point out that we need to prioritize, and we need to be able to act as a group and get behind what's put in front of us. Whether we have some naysayers, that's fine, but if we act as a consensus, then we can actually get things done. So.
I tend to agree with you, Bob, though, that kind of, I don't know, whether it's off-site, whether it's whatever, you call it a retreat, whatever, but to take as many of us as can face to face for a concentrated period of time on just this one task and just see how far we get. I think that's worth trying. I know everybody's busy and maybe we can't find a time, but let's try, you know.
I'm going to suggest a starting time of maybe Saturday, March 29th. We can do morning, afternoon. It doesn't matter. Probably mornings are more focused time for people.
Now, I'm out of town that time.
Okay.
I actually come in that day, so I wouldn't be able to. But you
Okay.
could do this, you know, you wouldn't need me.
Oh, we need you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Maybe we could create a doodle poll online.
Oh.
A doodle
Yeah,
poll. Have you
that's-
seen
that's a
those?
possibility.
And send that
Somebody
out.
have to do it for Jerry.
I will do it for Jerry.
Okay.
Okay.
Or Jerry.
Yep.
Well, Sunday, the next day.
30th?
Works for me.
I can do either one.
Afternoon might work.
Okay.
Right now I'm clear.
Afternoon would work for me.
1 o'clock, say. Is that afternoon?
That's. Let's discuss this. Can we reach consensus?
That's my kung fu time.
And I would,
You can still do it.
I'm working now, and so I would, have to, I know.
You don't know.
So I have to, well, I will be leaving for Bend that day about 3. So I could do it
Okay.
earlier on Sunday, like,
I don't know if 2 hours would be. Do you guys
no,
think 2
I
hours would be
could
enough?
get you started.
Reasonable.
No, okay.
Well, is 11, I mean, people go to church, then
11's okay. I'm done with, okay.
I can do that.
11 would,
11 to what? Did you say you have to leave by what time?
3.
11 to 3. That's
that
4
gives
hours.
us 4
That's,
hours. And we could,
Maybe
We'll get
people can
potluck
come.
I'll get there as soon
Maybe.
as I can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
11 to 3,
all right.
Sunday.
Uh-huh.
Okay, that's a
30th.
luncheon meeting then.
And we can bring snack stuff to eat.
Now, do we need to be here? Do we need to take this
No,
meeting?
I think we can do it. I'll talk to Nancy Ide
This is,
and just see, you know, how much flexibility we actually have and what level of public notice we can provide.
Pete, was there a thing though that they did have like work sessions televised? I mean, I was going to say as long as we, you know, if it was instead of maybe imposing upon anybody, you know, to host or.
can it be just videotaped and not broadcast?
We're not making any decisions. This
No,
is
we're
a
just-
draft.
We're just
Yeah.
planning.
So-
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know city ordinance, but if we bring a draft to a meeting,
That's,
Yeah.
then talk about the draft, and then at that time, if there is a vote, that's public.
Yeah.
Is that,
Yeah, it's kind of like what goes into the draft. Nancy would say if you are deliberating towards a decision, you need to provide public notice, but we're talking 24 hours.
oh, okay.
Yeah. No, a week. Yeah. So.
Well, even if it was a week, we have more than that. So,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
so.
okay.
so
And
do
that's
we,
at your place. Okay.
I think my place is fine.
okay, is that okay?
Yeah, I don't have televisions there, but, you know, I
Well,
think
that's
it'll be
fine.
Yeah.
I don't
No,
care.
no cable, no television.
Can we bring?
How can we watch the game?
That's right.
So before we come to that meeting, can we get the notes from this meeting and
Yeah.
if we could get what we've talked about, even from the January meeting,
Yep.
if we could get that information that we talked about and then what we talked about here, so we have a place where we can start off. You don't have to start over.
Could we get just a kind of broad like overview of kind of the big things that might be coming down our laps or something?
You,
that's-
you mean like activities or
Well,
reviews?
just
or?
think about things like if we're going to be reviewing that mitigation plan.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Those
just those kind of
topics.
things.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if there's anything Blue Heron related that might, you know,
Yeah.
and those are, you know, the really big things we know that are out there. It's just whether or not within like maybe a 2-year time frame,
Yeah.
is it something that might be taken up that, you know, any kind of code review, just anything that's
Yeah.
big out there that take up a lot of time and energy.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. We'll try to put something
Yeah,
together.
yeah. And the big thing in that direction is, when is the code review coming up for any portion of the code overall? You know,
Right. It'll be late 2014.
So late this year. Then.
Yeah, so this is something this year that.
Right.
Okay, so that informs
they
us.
were going to kick it off, a month ago, but the Planning Commission's plate was too full. We had a ton of development review going on, a lot of zone changes, and they said, "Uncle, we can't review code and review zone changes at this rate." And we also have the sign code. Anyway, long story short, late 2014, comprehensive legislative file. We'll have to do another Measure 56 notice for this, and we'll be taking the Heritage Tree Code up to Planning Commission, City Commission, and then we can look at other things as well. So,
Yeah. So if we were notified and given the section of code that is being dealt with, and especially as it connects with what we're doing,
right.
so
Yeah.
and then we can make decisions about when do we start looking at this stuff.
Yeah.
Because it could be I don't know how big it is.
Well, I would encourage each of you to start reviewing the sections on your own just to familiarize yourselves with them. We're primarily talking about Chapter 1741 and Chapter 1749. And 1741 is our tree protection ordinance. And Chapter 1749 is our water resource and natural resources habitat ordinance.
Do they have copies of that?
Well, it's all
Or is it
online.
Online.
Yeah.
Does everybody have online, though?
And the reason we try to do everything online now is to save paper.
Well,
But we can provide paper copies as we start to redline and go through and things like that. Like Heritage Tree Ordinance, we went through and we provided, each time there was a revision, I think we had like 12 or 13 iterations of that, and I still got them all.
yeah.
But that's the kind of process.
Yeah, and there was
Yeah.
things that were referred to elsewhere in the code and
Right.
that we had to look at.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so.
So, yeah.
Okay.
So just to wrap that up.
Yep.
We are going to, our goal at that meeting in 4 hours is to come away with a preamble, a vision or mission goal, mission goals, and then an activity plan. And then at our next meeting, which is that in 2 months or a month?
1 month.
A month?
We meet
Okay, at the
monthly,
month-
but, we can,
At the monthly
schedule-
meeting
yeah.
that we already have scheduled, the goal would be to bring that draft here and then to have a vote on, what needs to happen next. And one of the plans I heard is to take it to the Facility Commission. And so get it ready and pick a month that we want to now let the commission know we'd like to bring this document to them.
Yeah. And,
Not clear to me that we would necessarily be done at our next meeting.
no,
It'll be just a
I mean, it's
draft.
certainly a
Yeah.
milestone.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I'm guessing, I would expect it would probably take us another month work beyond there, discussing it, revising it, getting
We'd like to have a
everybody's
draft.
comfort level up
Yeah.
before we were ready to actually hand it up
Right.
the
yeah,
chain.
and I think we also need to decide, are there parts of the bylaws in terms of, are there parts of it we just want to keep because of their organizational procedures and offices and staffing, and they're sort of the housekeeping stuff, which may be able to stay, and we're really talking about the scope of activities and the mission, which is at the beginning. So certain articles, I think we're talking about changing completely, and can just be adopted anew entirely, and then it becomes a new resolution. So you get rid of the old one, you start with a new one. It's probably the cleanest way to do it. But we would, rather than redlining the document, we could just cut and paste and say, so.
Maybe I think what we want to do with the agenda for the retreat, though, is figure out, from top down, maybe we don't get to bylaw revisions totally during that meeting, but we can section off stuff that we know we got X, Y, Z accomplished, and then maybe bylaw revisions have to be discussed at a regular meeting or something. It's just somehow, we have to figure out how much we can bite off or get done.
Yeah, we're basically trying to come up with the mission statement for this group, whatever form we're going to have it in. We've got the preamble, we've got the goals, so we're going to start with a mission statement, have overall goals, and then finally the individual actions. And we're doing the top levels here, top 2 levels, not the individual tasks, other than, as we refer to them as something that would fit under something, but we don't need to detail every last thing we're going to carry out at this meeting.
And you have a lot of the pieces. They're out there floating. We just have to bring them together.
Right.
And I think when we all get in the same room and we really put on those hats, those creative hats, I think we can do it. I really believe we can do it.
Yep.
Would you be okay if I work with Mr. Walters just to get what we need to at that meeting? If we need the bylaws, if we need whatever we need,
Perfect.
that we can have it there at that meeting?
That would be
Yeah.
great.
Bylaws and notes.
Great.
So Ms. Walters, is that okay?
Yeah.
Sounds good.
And we need, will you give us your address or email it to us? We don't want to do it online.
You
but-
won't find it anyway, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I will email the directions.
Okay, thank you.
I wonder if there's any other models for this in any of the other committees in the cities.
In
Purview.
terms of bylaw
Yeah, like
review,
the Park and Rec,
yeah.
or their mission. I mean, is there anything like that?
Well, I know each of the neighborhood associations, which has been reestablished the last few years, have each gone through a process of adopting bylaws for their individual neighborhood associations, based on a template that the city commission approved, because they wanted them to all function roughly the same way.
Don't we already have bylaws?
And we
We
have,
do.
yes.
We've got that
We
too,
do.
but
Yeah.
not the same.
As-
well,
yeah,
that
everyone's
we're
is a
doing.
little
Okay,
bit different.
That's fine.
Yeah,
I was just
yeah.
curious. Okay.
But would this template help us, Pete? I mean, should we be looking at that template?
I think it'd be a good example. Yeah, I think it's a little more step, by the book, because it refers to Robert's Rules of Order and
Yeah.
and
How
how
to
to make
run
a
a
motion
meeting.
and things of that
Yeah.
nature.
Yeah. That wasn't what I was looking for.
If that's not what you're looking for,
Yeah, well,
yeah.
often
But-
some of the neighborhood associations are a little more contentious than we are,
Right, right.
because there's people with really different ideas that attend some of those, and the other ones work very smoothly.
But they all have the same goal, which is citizen involvement
Right.
in the city decision-making process, whether that's land use, and it mostly is to do with land use, but it's also to do with urban renewal and spending on
Yeah.
public projects, so,
Yeah, and,
yeah,
and parks and
parks.
yeah, all sorts of things.
And I don't
Everything
think Pratt's
that,
updated theirs
that
in a while.
citizens are interested in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Very
Okay,
much,
so we'll
again,
continue this discussion at Shaw's house.
Yeah, that'll be
on the
good.
good progress. Yeah, thanks.
Potluck,
Yeah.
we think of make that kind of potluck
Take care.
over there.
Well, we
We
better.
talked about.
duplicate.
Bye, Carol. Thank you.
If I could get a list of everybody's phone numbers?
I'll send that.
I know where
Yeah.
you can get mine.
Yes. And actually, we're going to meet at your house, but another idea is if we could ever meet it.
Always, easy,
They have all
yes.
the chalkboards.
Where?
At
East Community
Community
Center,
Center, yes.
yeah, that'd be a good spot.
Well,
Yeah.
That'd be fine.
Is that
Yeah.
okay?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Because they have they have chart pads and everything there, and we could.
I think that would be better, not that I would love to go to Shaw's Place, but I
Yeah.
think in terms of the central location on Malala, and
And then if the public wanted to come,
Right.
they could come.
It's a public meeting,
Yeah.
others could come.
yeah,
We have a lot here tonight that.
so, yeah. Easton? Okay, well, is that,
Okay,
is
so
that,
then-
Oh, it's
Thumbs up?
fine.
Is that a thumbs up, thumbs? Okay?
Yes, that's
All right.
great. Thank you.
Good.
Okay.
Okay, and then someone can send us the address for that, because I don't know where it is, so.
Go up the hill, turn right.
Okay.
Easy.
Is
I
it
will.
the school at the top there?
1407 7th Street.
it says,
Yeah.
it's at the
East-
curve of
That-
Division on
okay,
the right.
Okay, I know where it
big
is, then. I
field
just
there.
didn't know the name.
The
Okay.
old school, though.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and I had a staff report on our previous recommendation that we passed at the last meeting.
Okay, so, as of 10 to 5 this afternoon, the word from David Frazier and Scott Archer was that they promised to have a written response for you at the next meeting. They do not have one as of today. So that is coming down directly from David and Scott. I think with the bridge and the Blue Heron project at the moment, they just got spread too thin. So
Darn, we should have told them the beavers took down the bridge.
Yeah. So I don't have anything formal from them
Okay.
at this point.
Well, needless to say, maybe I'm, beating a dead horse here, but I think anyway, am looking at this as kind of a test of how this committee functions and whether its recommendations do anything. So I'm damned interested in what kind of response we get, whether it's
Right.
timely, and what happens to the recommendation, whether they like it or not. I mean,
Yeah, and at this point, my feeling is that you need FaceTime with the city commission, and I think if Brian, you want to make an annual report on what the progress of this NRC is doing, we do need to do that anyway. So I think that would be a proactive way to do it, because we have a formal recommendation which you all agreed to, and it was sent to the management, and we need to establish a process.
I see this
Yeah.
as not
Yeah.
unrelated to what we were just talking about, and that is, what are the duties of this committee? How do we work? What kind of products do we produce?
How do we
Who do we
be
give them to?
effective?
What kind of expectation should we have about who sees them, who reviews them?
Yeah,
What kind of response we get back,
yeah.
But I think part of that, there's a reflective side of that too, and that is kind of expectations we would have of the city or departments that we invest the time and energy as city volunteers to do something that stuff is considered, reviewed seriously, and gone back to us in a timely fashion to show that we really have a partnership.
I agree. I want that too.
Can you talk about the planning commission, getting in front of the planning commission?
I think city commission.
City commission.
Yeah. The planning commission can act on land use items and code amendments that are before it, but really we're talking about more generalized recommendation that affects various departments and how the departments work on the cove. Particularly in this case, we're talking about how the Parks Department maintains trees along the trail abutting the Urban Renewal Committee's Urban Renewal Commission-owned properties along the cove. The master plan for the cove is approved, but there are some apartments that we're under review, and the cove developers are working with the city on a development agreement there. And there have been a lot of review in the past over how to best preserve and maintain the trees along the cove. And time's ticking, and it's an active situation, and there's been a lot of beaver herbivory on the cove trees around there. So the Parks Department took it upon
Beavers aren't
themselves to,
cooperating at all.
manage the area along the trail for liability and safety reasons because some of the trees are damaged. So the recommendation is to try to manage the trees in a more holistic way and fell them towards the cove and leave as many as they can on the ground if they have to, and minimize the amount they're actually felling.
And yeah,
And
one
that's
of the
go
problems
ahead.
is that certain trees were slated to be saved, and here's
Right.
the beavers mowing them down. And
Yeah,
part of our recommendation, I believe, is to get heavy gauge wire around them that's
And get
not
that.
wrapped tight around it like they did at the metro wetlands,
right.
and keep the beaver from whacking down the ones. Let them
Yeah.
cut down the ones that they can take out anyway.
Can't they read the signs?
They're,
Don't chew that
They don't
tree.
speak
That's-
English.
Yes.
Do not bite the
We're going to start
trees.
hazing.
Take that
Yeah,
one.
yeah, that's a good recommendation.
Yeah, they trapped them out of the metro wetlands.
Is this the
because,
same cove that they're working on now because of the bridge trestle?
Right next to
near-
it, yeah.
It's right next to
Yeah.
it, nearby, so,
Yeah.
okay.
Some sensitive tree removal going on there.
Yep. That was
yeah.
unfortunate. Okay, so let's go into new business. Why don't we go ahead and do the heritage tree?
Okay. So this heritage tree nomination is on private property. It was submitted on behalf of the owner, Ron Tom. Property location is 715 5th Street in the McLaughlin Historic District. The nominator is Dee Dee Dalsrud. She brought in the nomination on February 5th. the tree. She provided excellent documentation for this, including lots of pictures, an article from Trail News, or the cover from Trail News, and a lot of documentation as well regarding the benefits of urban trees, which I think is really, really useful. It is a sugar maple, Acer saccharum. Diameter at breast height, 4 foot 7 inches. Estimated height, I think, is 75. We had 110, but I don't think that's right. I think it's, if you look in the picture, that tree is about 3 or 4 times the height of the house, and the house is probably around 20 feet tall. So, I don't know.
Yeah, that's
Spread about
we do
50
up
feet.
here.
And the estimate, at least as with respect to age, and I'll just read what Dee Dee wrote. This tree has been a long-standing memory in our family with annual fall leaf fights. It's been pictured on the front page of the old Oregon City Courier newspaper. Has been used as a perfect example of a well taken care of sugar maple by our horticulture department at Clackamas Community College. This beautiful maple has been featured on the front page of the Oregon City Chamber publications OC Around Town. This magnificent tree is located at 715 5th Street, 1 block away from the public library, Pioneer Community Center, next to a preschool, and has been the featured arbor at the 5th Street location. This tree is reported to have been planted when the house was owned by Thomas Ryan. The home is fully restored and owned by retired Judge Ron Tom. Judge Tom has given me permission to nominate this fantastic tree. I look forward to the nomination process. With kind regards, Dorothy Dalsworth. And special thanks to the OSU Master Gardener, volunteer, and Clackamas Community College, Renee Harbour, PhD. In order to be nominated, the tree must meet our criteria for approval in Oregon City Municipal Code 1208040D, which is still our criteria until the Planning Commission approves our latest recommended draft. That is that the tree or grove be of landmark importance to the city of Oregon City due to age, size, species, horticultural quality, or historic importance, or it is listed as a state heritage tree as designated by the Department of Forest Resources, or be a rare species, or provide a habitat for rare species of plants, animals, or birds, and the tree must not be irreparably damaged, diseased, hazardous, or unsafe, or the applicant is willing to have the tree treated by an arborist under treatment will alleviate the damage, disease, or disease. And I know that the tree has been guided and supported in the canopy and has dropped limbs and on the property, but
No, I can't type it in.
is in pretty good shape.
Too used to a real computer.
And as far as I can tell, it certainly meets the criteria for nomination. If it is nominated and approved by the city commission, the process involves a deed restriction that runs with the land, under which the tree may not be removed unless it is a hazard as verified by a certified arborist. So that would be a protective covenant. And then the city will furnish the owner with a plaque and then list this tree on the city website. And as far as I know, the tree is not listed on the Clackamas record for heritage trees. So this would be an Oregon City nomination. Nor is it on any state list.
It's beautiful.
Any idea how old it might be roughly?
Well, in the back of the packet, there's a black and white photo, and it says, I don't know what the age of that photo is. I'd have to look at the
Oh, wow.
historic inventory for the house, which is in the packet as well. So the house, oh boy, was estimated to be constructed in 1892,
Yeah, so
Gothic revival.
yeah,
Now, they don't mention the landscaping or the house in the historic resource inventory, but that's not unusual. In the picture in the back, Dee Dee notes that the small maple tree on the right side is the same maple I'm submitting for heritage tree nomination. So that ought to give you some idea. Just about 100. Maybe.
Oh, let's nominate it.
Okay.
Yeah,
This is an amazing application.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
Works for me.
They did a good job. You know, it's a good example of an ornamental tree that's done well here. It's not particularly an invasive species, so it is non-native. So that doesn't oppose the nomination at all. And yeah, they've got a big. But yeah, I would favor going ahead with this. So I guess I need to call for a motion to approve this. Would someone like to do that?
Second.
I'm not supposed to do it. I'm supposed to get somebody else to do it. So somebody make the
Okay,
motion.
I'll motion.
Okay, someone second it.
Second.
Okay, we have a
Okay.
motion
All right.
to approve this heritage tree nomination form. So
All right.
do we have any further discussion, yea or nay? Okay, then in the interest of consensus, let's consider this approved and we can send it on to the city council.
Thank you.
Everything was this easy.
Love these.
Well, when you get down to an actual job that you can do and not just think about, then it's not so bad. Okay, now is our talk on the Nature and Neighborhoods Grant put off for a month, I believe?
Right. So let's kind of give the committee a little background on
Sure.
this grant program. Brian attended the meeting yesterday at Metro from 5:30 to 7, where they updated anybody who's interested on the process. I believe so. In the packet that they gave us at the meeting, they talked about the process for these nature and neighborhood grants, and these are to basically remove invasives and replant with native species. There's $200,000 available this funding cycle, I believe. Oh, sorry, $700,000.
700 this time,
This
and
one,
next
yeah.
year.
Yeah, and they go from a minimum of $25,000 per grant to up to $200,000 per grant, depending on the scope of the project. The emphasis is on partnerships and furthering the mission of the Nature and the Neighborhoods program. So they really want to extend the reach of this program into communities that do not have a history of benefiting from the restoration grant program. The first step is a pre-application, which the deadline for that is April 22nd. And at this point, I don't have a specific location. I'm also aware that Greater Oregon City Watershed Council is submitting through this project as well, and I want to be sure that we don't dilute their effort and that we get behind any effort they are making this year. So
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
We can easily. I've already been attending meetings with Rita Baker, the
so I-
part-time person that they does a lot of their work, and she's looking at really two grants, one this year and another next year. And I don't have a full list of the parks, but there's a number of parks and private properties that she would like to incorporate. But she may not, from what I heard last night at the thing, the land has to be dedicated to open space before the grant money can be applied to it. So, but to enlarge, this is something that I attended a meeting, and there's people willing to donate land if an intervening piece would be sold for park use, and it's adjacent to existing parks, includes a perennial stream, and a lot of landslide overlay zone land, platted in 1865 to 10 city lots. Those lots are still valid, except the geographic overlay affects quite a bit of the development potential there, because it's practically all of Kanema is landslide territory. There's houses built on the house I was at. There, when you have a landslide, it'll rotate like this, so you have a high area at the end, and then back here there's a wetland, and it's just a perfect example. And a lot of that land is owned by him or his son, and the son is willing to partially or fully donate the portion, a good portion of that creek. But the 10-lot section, we don't know yet. That's in the process of being found out. If they agree to cooperate on a thing like that, I'm going to encourage that Metro Capital Grant be applied for to acquire that intervening 10-lot parcel, because it's got a valuable stream. It would contribute greatly to any corridor for hiking trails that, and there's already old roads. One of the oldest roads in that area goes through this land. And so it's basically graded already. All you got to do is walk up it. And I've been looking at that from the other side, from the park, Old Kanema Park, and thinking, that looks like an old road up there, and it goes right into this property.
So yeah.
That's something it's probably going to come back unless there's a real opposition from the current landowners.
Right.
But they want to sell to a developer, as far as anybody knows. But
Yeah.
there's been no sale yet that we know of. There's been interest, though.
So I want to distinguish between these restoration grants and then these capital grant
Right, they're two different
programs.
things.
Yeah, two different things.
Yeah.
Capital grant you can actually purchase land and property with,
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
sometimes improvements, I believe, too.
and the improvements that
Yeah.
you would further the goal of the
Yeah, so-
program. Yeah.
Yeah, and whereas the restoration grants are for, getting rid of the ivy, the invasive trees and whatnot, the blackberries, the bullfrogs, all that good stuff.
Minimum qualifications for these grants are, you got to address at least one of the Metro program goals. You have to have at least 3 partners. Applicants may partner in multiple grant applications. After being awarded the grant, the project must be completed within 24 months for small grants, which are the ones up to $25,000, and within 36 months for the larger grants up to $100,000. They can extend those up to 24 months for post-project maintenance. And Metro does allow the use of fiscal agents for groups that do not have 501c3 status. There's a 1-to-1 match requirement, which can come from in-kind contributions, materials, services, or volunteers.
Let me mention one thing. That's
Yeah.
just for the restoration grants. It's
Right.
2-to-1 for the capital grants.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
2-to-1 for that.
They can still be soft, not hard.
Yes. Yes. If you get volunteers to clear the ivy and blackberries, that goes towards $22 an hour, thereabouts, is what Metro will credit you at.
Overhead costs are reimbursable up to 10% of the total grant award, and as a match up to 10% of the total project cost. Maintenance costs are maybe up to 10% of the total grant award. So the pre-application is fairly straightforward.
Yeah, it's simple. One
Uh,
page.
Our challenge is to identify a location and then get Parks or Public Works to just be like, yeah, that sounds great, go forward. Kelly and I will volunteer our time, as time permits, to help write it as far as the city's component, and I'll need to coordinate with Rita on some of this stuff. So I wanted to get your feedback. We talked to Friends of Trees this year about doing a Friends of Trees project as well, which, Berkeley Hills Neighborhood Association, we went to their meeting, and they were very receptive about doing a tree planting project, which is kind of not the same thing, but, the type of project which might work could be partnership with a church or with a neighborhood association in a park in their neighborhood that needs some restoration work. That was one idea, because Berkeley Hills Park is small, but I'm open to suggestions. We do have a month.
Pete, I've got a
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
I know the city has finite resources for kind of like parks maintenance.
Sure do.
When you have like donations and like park lands expand and kind of like maintenance responsibilities expand, does the city have a process just to kind of figure out what the additional budget impacts are or resource needs, because
Yeah.
I can remember decades ago talking with Metro when they were in the land purchase, but they really weren't set up that time to figure out how do we plan, maintain, staff the land that we're buying. And obviously Oregon City would be a smaller scale, but still, I'm in favor of the donations, but how do we know the city's got the resources to manage it responsibly?
Well, I think this is where the grant is critical. Parks will tell you, and anybody who knows the Parks Department will tell you that they can barely maintain what we have. So we're not going to be acquiring new parkland unless there's SDC money for new construction, which means we can only spend system development charge money on new construction. We can't use it to maintain existing parks. So the parks budget is just eating itself. So the way I see the capital grant program money could only work if somebody with deeper pockets, maybe like the State Parks Board, came in and funded at least 1 or 2 years of maintenance or something like that. But I don't know. Normally, if that happens, there's a full master plan requirement for the park that's going to be done, where you have landscape architects and engineers, irrigation specialists, and everybody involved. And then you project that long-term maintenance budget out and you decide whether it's even worth it. And the last two, we have 2 parks that they put out to bid. The one on Glen Oak is a new park acquisition on Glen Oak Road. And, the other one, Hazel Grove Park, which has been waiting for a master plan for years. So those are the priorities for the Parks Department right now, because the neighborhoods have been just waiting for that. And those are fairly good-sized parks. They're considered community parks, so they have like a half-mile service area. They're not huge, but those are the 2 priorities as far as getting a master plan done. I couldn't speak for the Parks Department about new commitments at this point. Yeah.
Are you looking to this committee to come up with a suggestion as to where?
I'd like a few ideas, yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I'm just going to say that in terms of the Berkeley Hills neighborhood, I
Yeah.
know that they have a lot of really active people there. I mean, they're hard worker people. Metro's done a lot of restoration work with the Oregon City Watershed Council in Newell Creek Canyon, various places, as has Metro done their own. And I'm thinking on that site there may be a lot of invasive holly and ivy in the ravine areas.
Berkeley Hills Park?
Yeah,
Yeah.
down below, not in the upper part of the park, but where it heads into the channel. And if there is considerable ivy and holly there, that would be a perfect way to, because they're trying to get that whole area contained, and it's just parts and pieces at a time. So
That's what I was thinking as well, because Eric Carr looked at the shortest possible distance to connect street right-of-way, which needs urban forest canopy,
yes.
to parks on either side, Singer Creek, Waterboard, and then Berkeley Hills. And you could potentially concentrate on that small area.
And Metro
Yeah, so-
owns land just on the
And then
other side of
Metro and
Berkeley
Newell
Hills
Creek.
as part of their green space. So it's
Yeah.
I think it would be a
I think it would too, Shaw. I think marrying it up with a Friends of Trees project, doing street tree planting as a separate project would really be cool.
absolutely.
And then get the neighborhoods out and working in that park. What do other people think?
And Metro has a lot of expertise in terms of dealing with the invasives,
Yes,
how
they
to
do.
do it. So, and I know it's part of their agenda, to make as much of a difference as they can in their.
They give us some materials, they got Jonathan Saul was their scientist at the meeting last night who
Right.
put together a beginner's guide to developing restoration projects, and I'd be happy to make copies of this stuff.
Right.
Talked about, what you should budget in terms of long-term maintenance. Whether, if you're thinking about using contractors, what you can expect to pay.
Right.
stuff like that. Really good nuts and
I'd be glad
bolts
to go
stuff.
out and look with you on that site and just see what the situation is there.
Yeah, I haven't been down there in ages.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe soon?
Yeah, it'd be great. Sooner the better.
Yeah.
Pete,
Yeah.
if I could add just one thing about the restoration, I think what people really need to take account, we talked about what the beavers are doing to, some of the trees along the Clackamas, but people really need to take account and be aware of, when you have deer, when you have nutria, when you have beaver, you have to really, if you're looking for a better survival rate, you got to really take into account their presence or impacts and mitigate for that, or otherwise your outcomes could be a lot less than expected unless you're just raising them.
Hmm? Yeah, I think so. I mean, the Cove is a little more complicated than doing because it's a prospective development site.
But no,
Yeah,
but it's
yeah.
still like I've had to put 6-foot high wire up to keep deer off of Red Osier Dogwood over at Main
yeah.
City Park.
Right. Yeah, I hear you. It's expensive. Yeah, and we asked the question last night. Do you have any kind of data on long-term costs of maintenance and what seems to be working? And there's not a lot of data on that.
It's
yet.
so varied,
Yeah,
there's,
yeah, exactly.
West Lynn has managed to get grants for clearing out their invasives and so on, and but it's a huge job, and it's never done perfectly. They've done amazing things, but over at Marius Young, it's primarily done by volunteers rather than contractors. Like West Lynn has used a mix of contractors
And that would be the wonderful component that Metro would like to see in these situations, is that there's a sense of ownership that comes out of the project and that is ongoing.
Well,
Yeah.
I think the city should really look to the neighborhood associations as potential sources of volunteers, as well as the Greater Oregon City Watershed Council and any other group that is working in that direction.
All right. Well, I think we can easily.
Yeah, I think Old Kanema Park would be a good site as well. It definitely needs some work.
Is that one of the
sections-
ones that Rita and Brian Vaughn are looking at?
It may be. I don't have the full list.
Or at least that adjoins it, they're looking at that, exactly the land that you mentioned next to it, Brian, is.
Yeah, they are. That's true. And I think they want to do those private parcels there because it's adjoining the actual park that they can do. But it's got some rare, not necessarily rare plants, but unusual plant assemblages there. There's rocky outcrops with a flat top that are covered in dogtooth violets in about a month from now. It's really, really striking, and hardly anybody knows it's up there.
Okay.
By some miracle, there's no ivy there
Right.
yet.
Well, I'll connect with Rita
Yeah.
and see what she's thinking.
Yeah, she's putting Waterboard Park on for another grant next year
Yeah.
at this point in time, because it's a huge project.
Yeah, that's huge.
And but there's parks in Oregon City that could use more work than that.
Yeah, I think
And,
at Waterboard Park, we've classified it as a natural park in our charter,
Right.
even though it's surrounded by, housing, old housing, and
Yeah, but it's got big old trees, and it's an interesting geologic area because it's an active landslide that's slowly moving all the time.
so is Old Kanema Park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all landslide
And Barclay
material as
Hills,
well.
for that matter.
Whole city.
Yeah, anything with a slope, But
Right.
Waterboard Park had that one rare fern, and it's actually threatened by other native plants, as well as ivy.
Well, okay.
Yeah, so.
We got
but,
some ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like I say, Rita is planning on writing that in. They just don't want to do too much at once because they got to get all the matching funds and so on.
And and I don't know what level of commitment Rita has gotten from the city yet. So that's
Yeah,
kind of where we step in.
Yeah, they're willing to do something, but I don't know if it's on paper yet.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thanks.
Okay.
And then the rest of the timeline is you submit by April 22nd, they provide a response back in a month, and then the full formal application is in August. I think August 31st or maybe the 1st, I can't remember. But yeah, you get a little time, but that's a pretty robust application, so.
Yeah. I think that pre-application is to weed out people that, just don't have the concepts down correctly.
Yeah.
And
I think we got it.
I think supporting Rita and what she's trying to do would be real good. And, but there's going to be another grant next year and probably one the year after that, too. So we can, just bite off what can be done in a year at a time.
So this is the pre-application handbook revised January 2014. I think this is on the Metro website.
Yeah, it is.
So, okay.
All right.
Thanks.
All right. So do we have any other staff reports?
Let's see. The Kenema Bluffs. Metro submitted last week a site plan and design review application for the Kenema Bluffs Overlook Trail, Bridge, and Boardwalk, which is right along the edge of the bluff. It's in completeness review right now, so we send it to the geologic hazard engineer because they want to be able to stabilize the overlook on the edge of the bluff, and there's going to be some modification to the bluff edge in order to make it safe. So, and then the natural resources component is a type 2 review, which you need to take a look at once it's complete. They've done, they delineated where the wetlands actually are, and then they want to do a boardwalk around the edge of the wetland, and then at one point actually cross over the wetland from one end to the other without trying to put too many footprints down into the sensitive parts. So that's all part of a site plan. We're reviewing it as a minor site plan, but the geologic hazard and the wetland redelineation are type 2 processes. So once that's complete, which we have to send them a notice in April the 12th, we have to tell them that the application is complete or incomplete and what they need. I expect that it's going to be deemed complete because they've done such a lot of work of trying to make sure that it's right. And so we would be doing a public notice in late April. And I think that puts your review roughly in mid-May. We would be able to show you the project and get feedback on it because it will be in the staff review point there. But since we have a public notice comment for type 2, which is 14 days, we'll be sending that notice to you on the first day when it's complete.
Pete, I got a question. I
Yeah.
understand with a lot of trail design, the idea is trying to leave some kind of buffer so you're not running trails right along the edge. We have sensitive species or encourage people to actually muck around in the water in that. But I also heard a lot, if you run a bridge like right through the middle of something, you obviously have more chances for disturbance of wildlife. It could be nests, it could be different things. And I'm just wondering if current best practices really is to run bridges right through a natural area where you're trying to benefit the wildlife.
Right, yeah. It's a really important question. I think that's what we're going to be looking at. I think there's a balance between preservation and interpretation here, and I know that Metro is very conscientious about this sort of thing. They don't want to be disturbing what is intact already, but there's probably going to be quite a bit of ongoing work in terms of enhancement in the next few years as well. So let's be cognizant of that as we review it. I haven't actually reviewed it yet, so I think that's probably a lot of people's concern. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the wetlands there are shallow soil wetlands too,
Yeah,
which
very
is real
shallow.
unusual.
Probably-
You have a layer of rock that holds the water, and then basically got water on top of rock with very little soil development. It's not like your normal wetlands at all.
Somewhat ephemeral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of them may be ephemeral too, or at least partially so.
And moving.
Yeah. And they're going to be odd shapes too.
Yeah, they are odd because
I've looked at the area, and it's just odd little erosional channels from the Missoula flood sort of thing, that have turned into wetlands.
yeah, I mean what the city adopted as a wetland layer in 1996 and what is out there now are wildly different. So
Because the way you're describing it, there's not a whole lot different you're going to see from looking the bridge straight down that you wouldn't see from the edge. I mean, this is...
Well, I'd have to see the plan to judge it,
yeah.
But, I'm just talking about what the conditions I saw being out there earlier. It's a beautiful area, and you can go out there anytime.
I've got the file electronically. You're welcome to take a look at it now.
Yeah.
So the project coordinator for that is a landscape architect. It's not Brian Vaughn, who you know. It's a guy named Rod Washtanek, and he's the lead on that. Okay.
Okay.
I don't have any other things at this point.
Okay. Okay, do we have any member reports?
Just maybe one event announcement. On Thursday, April 3rd, the Institute for Economics and the Environment, Portland State University, will be conducting a Should Oregon Lead on Carbon Taxes, a panel discussion. It was scheduled earlier, but got snowed out. But it's going to be Thursday, April 3rd, 2014, from 6 to 8 at Portland State University's Market Center building, room 123.
Okay. And then we can just move on to our last item, future agenda items. And we've already discussed some of those. And so we've got, we're going to have Rita next time talking about finalizing, what she's got until the 22nd, so we'll be just ahead of her deadline to get that pre-app in, but she's actually working on the full app already. And
Right.
trying to nail it down a little better than, you can actually just guess, on the pre-app because they're not holding you to the figures. Just want to know if you know approximately what you're doing. And so that'll be there, and we'll be discussing what we're discussing tonight. Yet again. Okay, so, and whatever else comes up, of course. Sounds like it'll be May before we discuss some of this other stuff, but
I think it'll be April 9th will be our formal meeting date. So we'll have the presentation from Rita and Brian talking about that.
so Brian Vaughn's coming as well?
Yes.
Okay, good.
And we may be able to provide an update on the sewer master plan update, which John Lewis is essentially the lead on
Okay.
that. The Public Works Department has contracted Brown and Caldwell Engineering to do the sewer master plan update. So they're really looking at capacity issues that affect the entire city based on everything that we've done today, including the South End concept plan and the Beaver Creek Road plan, refining some of the initial planning estimates that are coming out of those plans. And they're also looking at where the city system connects into the west system, meaning the big pipes that go to the sewer plant, which Wes has jurisdiction over, and seeing if there are surcharge and flooding issues that are of concern, They've done some. It's about a 50%. Some of the technical documents that are coming out of the process are about 50% now, and they are noticing some of those concerns and have raised concerns that affect zone changes that are under review by the city right now, and are probably in the next week or so. The Public Works Department will be formalizing some comments about the system because they affect existing development review. It may not affect very long-range planning because some of the recommendations in the long-range plans, like the concept plan, are to do more flow modeling, more sewer modeling before land even is considered for annexation. But we're talking about projects that are directly affected.
There's more and more documentation that pharmaceutical drugs entering the sewer system, don't get pulled out during treatment, and that some of these chemicals, when they get into the natural systems, are having an impact upon the natural environments, like fish on Prozac, and the effects of maybe some of the hormonal drugs have upon the natural systems and wildlife. Is the city even looking, because you can't, once it's in the water, it's really hard, but some places are actually trying to get things where people are dropping off surplus or out-of-date subscriptions so people don't flush them down the toilet.
That's happening locally.
Yeah. I would have to talk to Wes and see, because that's, they're our sewer provider, Tri-City Sewer Plant.
Yeah.
And see
That's a
what
good question. Yeah.
what they're hearing from the public about that.
Yeah, there's been some news articles the last couple of years or so about that. It's finally noticed,
Well, yeah, because even that stuff's getting picked up like by water, things downstream, so you
Yeah,
can really...
right. I've seen those articles, and they're pretty interesting. One question I had is, are they looking at condition of the older parts of the system, especially? Yeah.
They're looking at condition, capacity, and then there's something called an I&I, which is where you test for leakage within the system and where the major problems are. And that's a very expensive process because I think you have to pressurize your sewer lines. Yeah, it's nothing you take lightly. You go into this I&I thing, and you have to have multiple partners and state funding. Kind of, that's as much as I know about it. I didn't even know the term until this afternoon. Infiltration and something, But that's one of their big concerns in terms of how the full system is tested for integrity. I think we have the city sewer basins and the ones that are monitored by the city. We know quite a bit about where those pipes connect to Wes outside the sewer basins, or the Wes jurisdiction, but there's cross communication now with Wes, and Wes will need to determine when they get a notice from the city about a specific development activity, whether they are going to have capacity for it or not. There's some local land use deference there, but at the same time, they're the final recipient. So we're coordinating on that.
And the oldest parts of the city, are there original sewer pipes still in use anywhere in the city, or are they?
I don't know the answer.
Oh,
to that.
There's some pretty old ones, I think.
Yeah. I know if you're talking about not sewer but water, when we did the water master plan update a few years back, the recommendation is that you replace 2 miles of sewer per year in order to have a functioning, healthy water system.
The city's been doing like 0, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that influenced the rate structure discussion and the charter and the mandated rollback.
Yeah, it helped keep the rates down until everything breaks down.
Right. You can't do that under the current rate structure. Then you start to see the effect on water quality.
I just remembered something I should just mention. I have no idea whose ownership this in, but I saw the original water system for Kenema this afternoon. It's still there. The roof's gone, but the cement tanks and the spring is still gushing, and the spring doesn't get smaller in the summer, evidently. It's tapped into some aquifer that's powered from who knows where, probably the Cascades, and just gushing out, and just goes down to a little wetland, and and
But nobody's using that. is there?
no, it's just all abandoned. It's all been replaced by Oregon City Water. But what happened to the land? You would think if it was controlled by Kanema before it was part of Oregon City, it would have passed to Oregon City. But I don't know. But someone's checking that out.
So,
Very interesting little spot.
so far I have presentation for future agenda. I have a presentation from Rita and Brian. We'll have our goals review and an update on sewer master plan. And anything else anybody wants to add?
Is this new business?
Future agenda items.
Oh, well,
new
the
business.
city manager's coming to do a presentation to us about the beavers and our recommendation.
That's right.
I want to talk to the beavers themselves.
Yeah.
Just want to emphasize that the next, or one of the upcoming city commission meetings, we need to provide a report of what we've done. So Brian and Shaw, if you want to pencil that in and come, we can do that.
That's for
Be short, very
2013.
Pardon?
What time period?
They meet the,
No. What time period of the report?
Past year?
The
yeah,
calendar year?
well, yeah, I'd say past year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gosh, what did we do?
Well, we
minutes.
did street tree list, updated
yeah.
that, heritage tree code recommendations, several heritage tree.
Yeah.
Also provided a recommendation on Waterboard Park.
Yeah. And that was part of the heritage as well.
Right, yeah,
But
yeah. And then I think what else we do? Well, we had a
There's
few
some-
sessions of, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say we've did several heritage tree, or
Yep.
one or two or something.
And it started to present one of the codes. I think it was the Natural Resource Overlay District Code.
Yeah.
Kind of explain that. Great.
Sigh.
Thank you.
Thank you. A lot of work, Pete.
It's moving forward. This is great.
Okay. Okay, if anyone has no more reports or anything, we'll go ahead and adjourn. We're done.
Thank you.